office budget. And I received an email, as did many people, the other day. It was posted on social media as well. It's from Commissioner Boyce, and at the end of the email it states, in addition, Boyce paid legal defense out of his pocket and county travel responsibilities totaling around $8,000. This must be reimbursed in the near future. I'd like to ask you to suspend the talks on the commissioner budget until such time as you know how much has been spent. I don't know how $8,000 worth of travel expenses could have been accumulated over the last year, but I don't, as an auditor and as someone has done this type of thing for many years, I question whether this committee can establish a responsible budget with so much unknown information out there. The travel budget has been a point of contention over the last couple of years. This county was in court with Commissioner Boyce about it last year, and it's just fiscally irresponsible not to have submitted $8,000 worth of expenses now that the budget is rolled around again. And like I said, I would like you to consider suspending talk of the commissioner travel budget until such time as all these expenses have been submitted and can be verified, so that you know what you have on your plate as available money for the commissioner's office. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other requests for public comment? Seeing or hearing none. Let's move on to the minutes, please. Sorry.
Pardon me, Mr. Chair, I don't have my mic on. Someone has said that Court Boyce is trying to call in, so I just turned on our phone. Okay. Brenda, why don't you let him have him try again?
Okay, sorry.
Well, we'll wait until after the minutes, but I just had one kind of general comment as before we get into the minutia of all the numbers.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thanks.
Other than that, how was your weekend?
Great.
Portland Trail Blazers basketball, did you see that shot?
The one that bounced 3 times on the rim before it went in?
Yeah.
I got my lawn mowed, that's all I know.
Good for you.
I was in Brookings all day Saturday,
Curry County Commissioner or Budget Committee meeting. Hello? I'm not on mic. Can someone say hello?
Hello? Are you on? Commissioner Boyce?
Well, I'm ready to roll forward. And
Yeah,
if
let's
we
get
can act
rolling.
Great. I'm really focused on keeping track of our time.
Yes,
Commissioner
sir.
Gold.
Thank you.
Okay, this will be short, sweet, and to the point. In looking over the whole budget, I noticed that there's an increase from last year's budget to this year's budget of about $2.6 million in operating expenses. And I guess my big question as we go through, how much is the county going to receive in new revenue dollars to take care of this? So that's just an overall kind of an 800-pound gorilla in the room that we need to be aware of.
Thank you. That's more like a 2,000-pound gorilla in my viewpoint, but
Okay.
I have some questions we'll talk about later and talk about what some of those costs are, because I know we have some increased personnel costs and we certainly have to take that into consideration.
Just for the record, did we do roll call or anything?
Oh, no.
Okay.
I can ask that question though. Well, it's not listed on here, and
I
I
understand.
normally run your meetings. I do mine just a little bit different. So if we could please start with our legal counsel and introduce yourself, say your full name and what it is that you do, please.
John Huddle, legal counsel.
Sue Gold, Commissioner?
Christopher Pash, Commissioner.
Julie Schmelzer, Director of County Operations.
Louise Kallstrom, Finance Director, County Accountant, and Budget Officer.
And Brad Alcorn, member of the Budget Commission.
Ken Duque, Budget Committee.
Richard Thode, Budget Committee.
I was wondering if Court Boyce is present by phone.
We join in. Thank you, Council.
Good Lord.
Take that down a few.
Yeah, we're gonna have, hopefully IT will come in here and turn that down. Hold on.
Just see if his phone has a...
He's got it here, he's here. Try it, do a test, Court.
Testing.
There, that's much better, thank you. You had the walls vibrating, they had the volume all the way up.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you. The next item we had was the minutes from the May 6th meeting. Did everyone have an opportunity to review those minutes? Yes, Louise?
I just talked to JJ about where it says also present in number 1. I was present as the budget officer, so I think I'd like it to reflect that. And I believe he might have changed it and for it to be ready to sign if that was the only change.
Is that correct, Joe?
I corrected it right here for y'all ready to sign.
All right. Any other changes to the minutes from the meeting on May 6th? Is there a motion on the floor?
I move that we approve the minutes as corrected.
Second?
Second by Commissioner Pash. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, minutes will be accepted with the change as noted. And then we'll roll into our tentative schedule. So first up, we have Louise Kallstrom, who will be going over IGS cost allocations, non-departmental finance, payroll, and HR.
Well, first, what I'd like to do is to go over the questions that I received from Budget Committee members through this morning. The first one I received was from Budget Committee member Richard Toad, and the subject was the road fund, so it's a little packet here. So the first question that he asked was the balance for the fund at the conclusion of last year's budget and this year's balance to date. So the cash balance of the road capital improvement fund at 6/30/2018 was $30,386,950.26. And the balance of the road capital improvement fund, and these are cash balances, at 3/31/2018 was $30,948,200.74. And the second question was the interest received the last 2 budget years. The interest received during the 2016-17 was $378,285.48. Interest received in 2017-18, $536,678.83. And the interest received 2018-19 year to date at 3/31/2019 is $561,661.88. Do you have any questions?
I have one comment, I believe, on number 1 on the balance on line 2 there. It would be 3/31/19, not 18, is that correct?
That's correct, sorry.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
That's a typo. And the number 3 asks the current rate in the last year's. Not sure exactly what that was asking for a certain day or anything, but what I did was I printed out the table that's the LGIP that shows all the changes in the interest rate, and it's on their website, and I printed it from the May 25th, 2016 rate all the way up to the last rate, which was December 24th, 2018. And at that time, the rate was 2.75%.
Yeah, because of the bump in the Fed rate, we had 3 bumps last year in the Fed rate and 1 this year. The interest rates have gone up, and this reflects that.
Yes. So that's one of the attachments is the handout is the LGIP table. And number 4 is where is the money invested? It is my understanding it is invested by the state. More clarification will be helpful. So basically what I did was I copied the, from the LGIP, which is a local government investment pool website, what they're showing as the Oregon Short-Term Fund and how it acts, how it works. And that is the fund that invests the money that's in the local government investment pool accounts. I'm not going to read that whole thing. You can read it here, or you can go to the website. Number 5, it is my understanding that under the Oregon Revised Statutes, you have the authority to choose where to invest the fund. And when he says you, he meant the treasurer. And so I just provided ORS 294035, the investment of funds of political subdivisions and approved investments. So that's where the authority for the treasurer to invest the county's funds. Did the treasurer's office ever elect to invest the funds in programs not administered by the state? If so, when and why was it changed? So in October 2017, the treasurer invested with Piper Jaffray $2 million, FHLB, Federal Home Loan, 18 months at 1.5%. Maturity was April 2019. The interest received was $45,000. And at the time of the investment, the October 2000 state pool LGIP rate was 1.45. In November 2017, the treasurer invested with Piper Jaffray $3 million, FHLML, MMC, 15 months, 1.6%. Maturity was February 2019. The interest received was $53,100, and the discount was $7,097. And the November 2017 pool LGIP rate was 1.55. So the treasurer felt that was a good time to invest some of the road funds considering the LGIP rates, and she did a little bit of diversification. So right now, everything after these maturities this spring, everything is now in the LGIP accounts. And the last comment said, I have reviewed and understood the intent of the 2017 ORS 368.706, and you have a copy of that ORS attached. And as it was referenced in a letter dated March 22nd, 2018, and a copy of that letter is also attached from Governor Kate Brown. Any extra insight you can provide that would help me navigate the budget process would be appreciated. And I'm not exactly sure what was being asked here, but I said that Fund 2.24, the Road Capital Improvement Fund, which is now actually Road Fund 3.110, those budget transfers up to $1,184,081 to the Sheriff's Departments in the General Fund, and also transfers up to $3,543,999 to the Road Fund, Fund 115. So those are the ORS 368.706 gives us the authority to do those two transfers.
Can I make a comment, please?
Sure.
When I ask all these questions, I'm not with the intent that we deplete this fund, but I think in reviewing some of the past history of the county, financially, we're strapped. And so if we can come up with a plan, and I realize it may not be this year's fund, but if we can come up with a 3 or 5 year plan where we can offset some of the interest from this to the budgets. And before I go too far, I'd like to ask the county council if this is the correct statute that I'm talking about. I got it off the internet, so.
Yeah, I was able to look at that. Looks like the same one I'm looking at.
Okay. So anyway, I'm not advocating we deplete it, but let's utilize it and offset some of the interest that we're taking out. And what the statute provides for us, direct and indirect costs to the sheriff's office for patrol.
So-
And I'm not sure that,
Just wanted to explain to everyone what you just showed me, and in my packet I had a copy of a letter from the governor and then a printout here of 368706. You just have a different version.
just a different version.
I mean, a different source, but it's the same language.
Actually came off
So-
the internet, so that's why I wanted to ask you.
But did everyone else have these two items
Yes.
at their places? So that's
They're
what
all
Mr.
handed
Toad
out.
is talking about. Just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page there.
Right, so that's about all I have to say. I mean,
Thank you.
And the second question was from committee member Brad Alcorn. Subject also was the road fund. And he says, I have a question regarding the road funds. Can you tell me in the past 5 years how much of that money has actually been used to repair a road? Well, I'm trying to, the road capital improvement fund is a, okay, the word just escaped me. Reserve fund. It's not to be spent on doing something, it's reserved to be transferred someplace else. So the road capital improvement fund has been used by the road department as follows. In 2014-15, this amount spent, actual spent was zero. The amount budgeted was $2,425,000. In 15-16, the amount spent was zero, and the amount budgeted was $100,000. In 2016-17, the amount spent was zero. The amount budgeted was $650,000. In 2017-18, $393,582 was spent, and it was $270,436 was budgeted. In 2018-19, $2,337,017 is budgeted. The amount that transfers will not be known until all books are closed, and the only amount that was needed will be transferred. In 2019-20, right now, what we have budgeted is $3,543,999. That's in this budget. So that's the spending of road capital improvement funds for the road fund. These are actually transfers out of there. So those were the actual amount transferred and the actual amount budgeted to be transferred.
Thank you, and also thank you for taking time out of your day last week to help me kind of navigate through these numbers. I appreciate that.
So for the
Yes, we can hear you.
Those come in pretty well, but again, the volume is a little bit soft-spoken. Is she talking to the microphones there?
yes, I am.
Thank you.
So what I handed out was the, I believe these are also in your budget book, but I usually hand them out also. They have a lot of colors on them because I highlight them with different colors as I go through and make sure that these go into the budget correctly. So, so what I do is when I get the budgets back from all of the department heads, I put that budget into the column that's kind of orangey color under proposed, and the 6 different admin departments. Some of them have a cost, but some of them don't. Like the GIS does not have any payroll, so it doesn't get a percentage for their payroll. And so I put those in. They're spread by that percentage, and then the cost for the finance budget is spread by those percentages. So that's how the admin costs go in. You probably will not see these budget amounts now in those budgets because they have all changed by the amount of admin costs. So when I spread the budget, it was last year's admin cost in it. So it's not the same anymore once I put these new admin costs anymore in it. So the admin cost you will see on each budget, but these budgets are no longer these dollar amounts. The other page is the other admin cost, which is occupancy. It's spread by how much occupied space the department has. The ones that have changed this year would be let's see if I can read this. Code enforcement was added, and the public health moved from one office to a different office. Remember,
Economic development was added.
and economic development was re-added. It was there before, and now it's back in again. So those are the different from last year in spreading the occupancy. So that was, does anybody have any questions about how we assign admin costs to the departments in the county?
So just to clarify, relative to the occupancy admin fees, that's based on real estate occupied by each department.
Yes.
Pretty simple formula. And the methodology on the admin fees, is that based on the number of FTE?
No, it's based on their budget, their
Actually based on
expenditure
their
budget.
budget number.
It's the expenditure part of their budget.
Okay. Any other questions?
No.
So we're on to the non-departmental.
Yes.
Okay, so non-departmental is tab 1. So non-departmental is the discretionary uses of revenue, and they're not specific to a department within the general fund. So the main bulk of the revenues in the general fund are property taxes, and the payments in lieu of taxes from the federal and state government, some electric co-ops, and the rest are basically kind of shared state revenues for alcohol and tobacco and other amusement. So the increase in property taxes is usually we just do the 3% increase in from one year to the next. What has changed a lot in here is that the ONC money, last year I budgeted $1 million, this year it's 800. The last year this year was because of there's still an SRS payment that we actually just received, but next year the SRS payment will not affect that ONC money. We still get the ONC money, timber money, but we don't get the supplement of the SRS next year. The other thing that changed was increasing the carryover balance, beginning fund balance, to balance the budget.
Can you tell us lines as we go through? So I got my ruler here so I can.
The beginning fund balance is line 31. The ONC money is line 7.
Okay, I got the ONC.
Under the expenditures, what's changed is last year we budgeted for the 1.25 of the code enforcement officer in non-departmental, and that's lines 1 through 8 on page 16. And we also budgeted for $60,000 on line 15 for professional services for that department, or the code enforcement officer, to do their duties. We have moved code enforcement officer to a new department within the general fund. It is going to be under tab 12, and I believe that we will be going over that one later today. I also put in I could see it. Line 17, I put in $75,000 for the settlements and deductibles for our general liability property insurance. Our property insurance payments is spread throughout the departments, but this is for the part that is not full funding of the part that we're exposed to, but it has a start of how much it might cost. I don't think that I put up legal a little bit. And line 20, if you see that this year's adopted budget is $23,200, and I put in 100 for next year. The $23,200 is actually what it is now after several supplemental budgets. That is the money that we use when things come up during the year that we can transfer to other places to take care of. Last year we had the jail elevator, and we had to transfer money to fix the jail elevator. So it's back up to 100,000, and that just gets used throughout the year for things that come up during the year that are unplanned.
Can I ask a couple of questions before we? I'm going to go back to page 15, and if you look at line, I went through this whole thing line by line, so. Okay, line, it's 18, where there's 80,000. I'm just wondering what that was for.
That is the state. Actually, I thought it was, I'm sorry, I thought the title of that line was changed, but it's state and it's the marijuana state tax money.
Can we make
The
sure?
other little question on that page, two questions. I noticed miscellaneous revenue went down 200,000, which is line 26.
Line 26, last year we had the sale of the airport in there.
Ah, okay. And then one last, this is really a big question. I notice on line 31, big difference of 1,188,261. It says unassigned fund balance. Did this come from the road fund? Is
Now,
that?
this is beginning fund balance. This is the carryover.
Okay. Okay, thank
And-
you.
And in the budget message, I believe I said that we,
Yeah, you could, but I got into the minutia, so.
yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Are there any questions?
Of course.
Of course.
So, in plain language, where's the marijuana tax revenue listed?
And
She
In
just
plain
said-
sight.
in the
Transparent.
state money is $80,000. The local money is in the figure that's in miscellaneous.
So relative.
That's line 18 you're saying?
Yeah.
Relative to looking at 18.
18 is the state money.
There's no second year or first year proceeding. We don't know if that money's up, down, sideways.
It is going to be reported, I believe, in this year's actuals. We have to move it over there. But nothing was budgeted in this year for it, because at the time of the budgeting, there was a secrecy clause that we signed with the state of Oregon, and county council can explain that.
Right, and then they just recently legislated that away because it was causing a lot of problems.
So it's no longer secret anymore.
The state isn't.
Okay.
But I think even relative to a local one, we don't need to know where it comes from, but how can you budget if you don't know the numbers? Generally,
I do
when-
know the numbers, and they are in here under miscellaneous, but the amount is not revealed in our budget of exactly how much of miscellaneous is the county marijuana tax revenues.
So in other words, part of it's state, part of it's,
Yeah.
okay.
We have, there's the state that we share with all the other counties, and the local is our locally collected taxes. We collect through the state. They send the money to the state sends the money to us, but it's separate
So-
taxes.
So they don't tell us how much they're sending us?
Yes, they do, but I am not allowed to report it,
Oh, okay.
the local one, yet.
But we can report the state one because they've changed the rules.
They changed that rule in the last
But not the local.
year or so.
Right, so there's two things at play, excuse me if I could. We have actually a collection agreement with the Department of Revenue, and so they have tighter restrictions on the disclosure than state law. So we got the legislature by some means changed the state law, but they didn't change the part that governs our local disclosure. So the Department of Revenue collecting that for us is kind of putting restrictions on it, for lack of a better word.
So again, I want to go back to the point of it's difficult to process a budget. I don't want to know who's paying. I don't care about that. I just want to know what the end number is and try to get some track history. What did we get in the current year? What do we expect in the next year? That's part of budgeting. That's a significant number because we're talking about potentially, depending on the amount of money that's coming in, reducing the amount of money we might take out of the road funds to pay for services. So we want to limit that. We don't want to dig too deep on that. And the best way to do that is to make sure we have a good idea of what all of our revenue is.
Well, we could tell by this budget that the state marijuana tax money is about $80,000, and the local is somewhat less than $120,000.
So on the 80,000, is that what's been,
That
what
is-
have we collected so far this year?
I can't give you that number off the top of my head.
Okay.
I can provide it probably later this afternoon. But I used what we have collected in the past to establish that $80,000 number.
So, and I'm not trying to belabor this point, I just want to be really clear about it. Generally, when preparing a budget, it's good to look at second year proceeding, first year proceeding. It's also good to look at what the adopted budget was for the current year, but it's also nice to have a general ledger with our current year to date. It may only be 10 months in or something like that, but it tells us what the current trend is in spending this year and cost, as opposed to just having second, first proceeding and adopted. It would be nice to know what did we expend so far.
Those
10
numbers
months.
those reports are posted on the internet, and the last one posted was March 2019. So it's on the finance department, Curry County. And it's available for you to look through.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Sir,
maybe a light one that we do what the state legislature does. We can have overextended budget forecast to justify premature spending. Thank you.
So those numbers are available. I can bring you, the reason that it's not on line 17, the reason it's not in the adopted, because there was no budget to show that all of that revenue was budgeted down in line 26, because at the time we were not allowed to disclose that amount. But I can tell you how much we have received so far this year. I'm going to have to bring that to you later today.
so the line 26, it was miscellaneous revenue. I'm assuming that was more than just any potential marijuana tax
Yes.
revenue, because that was a pretty big number in
Yes, it also
preceding year.
had a sale of the airport. in there.
And so council, with any, Mr. Huddle, with any provisions that you need to hold at some point, maybe tomorrow, take a fresh look at what those Department of Revenue standards are, please, so we could just make sure that if there's information that we can give to the public, I'd like to be able to do that.
Okay.
If obviously that information is not available for release, then clarifying that again for the benefit of the public would be most helpful.
Thank you.
Okay, Director Kallstrom, sorry.
That's all right. Any question you have?
Anybody else have any other questions?
I have one small question, but
Sir.
could turn out to be big. Under court fines, and I've been trying to go through the statutes on what comes in from the cities, and it's my understanding we get like $16 out of the fines from the cities on each citation that's less the amount collected.
What line are you discussing?
It would be 21, I believe.
What page?
It's page 15. Again.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, 16, 15.
It's 15.
15.
Yeah.
15 and 21 under court receipts.
All right. So $12,000, and just from having traveled through the communities of Port Orford and Brookings, they seem to be fairly active for traffic enforcement. And I know we don't have a justice court, right, for our traffic fines. Where do the money from the Sheriff's Patrol, when they cite somebody, is that limited to the same $16?
Yes, it is. I know that through conversations with John, most of that money goes back to the state for training. I've actually had a conversation with John about something like that, bringing in a court, that we can do a court here, and it's a future conversation, but right now that's where it is, yeah.
Thank you.
And just to kind of go down that road a little bit, juvenile used to get funds from the municipal courts, so that would be Port Orford and Brookings. Are they still getting those in their?
I believe so.
Okay. So a state court, they did ratchet down the money. We used to get a pretty good chunk of change about 10 years ago. And
Unless we did our own court again.
yeah, That's probably not going to happen. But the Muni Court's paying, and those dollars end up going over to juvenile.
Right.
Yeah. So bottom line, a big chunk of our money goes to the state whenever we issue citations.
It wasn't a big chunk, most of it, and we get to keep $16. If a fine's $400, they get $384.
So we always just get 16 no matter what?
That's, I think, pretty standard. Am I correct?
Yeah, I don't know how.
And
much
and
that
my
is,
understanding,
yeah, that's sure.
and my understanding is that money's used for the police academy. When we send a new hire to the academy, we're not out. We don't have to pay for that. Basically, it's already taken care of.
Correct. And moving forward, just another note on that, we are going to start charging. If somebody steals one of our deputies, we can write that charge back off to the people that stole them from us. And we are going to start doing that moving forward.
Okay. So Louise, I think we're on to finance if there's no more questions about non-departmental. Hearing none.
What page is that?
Finance is page 155.
Yeah, that would be real helpful if we could say page and lines when we're
Or
going
tab
through
number.
this.
It's tab number 24.
24.
So, accounting fund is a admin services fund, and I don't believe much has changed. Payroll changed by with the PERS rate and things like that. The rest of the budget hasn't changed by much either, except for, I believe, insurance. The amount that was assigned to this fund increased.
Before you continue, I just had a couple of questions just to help with personnel as we go through the next couple of days. So where's the status of the union negotiations? Have those been resolved? So we have an idea of what is there a percentage increase relative to wage, and what is the health benefit? And we have, I believe, 3 different unions that we're dealing with, and then we also have the non-represented. So basically 5 with the elected officials.
So when we deliberate over our labor negotiations with the Board of Commissioners, that's in exec session, so we don't talk about that publicly. It's possible this body could go into exec session and we could talk about that as well. I think a general answer to the question, maybe if I could ask, maybe rephrase the question, Louise, have you budgeted in anticipation of certain outcomes of those? Have you budgeted for raises, for instance, for different unions and whatnot? Is that is that what you were kind of getting at?
I have budgeted in this budget. I believe it was in the budget message that I have budgeted kind of what has been on the table.
Which is sort of representative of our historical past raises, I think.
Well, the reason I asked the question is we have a $2 million increase in cost. I want to know how much of that is personnel, not just me personally, but that's my job to ask those questions. And I understand that what happens in a union negotiation is confidential in between. Totally get that. But we are trying to approve a budget, and we need to have the best information we possibly can. about what those percentage increases are. It helps us to make sure that we're looking at all the costs and doing our job the way we're supposed to.
So the PERS increase was 4%. That was just PERS.
To 15.43% for the next biennium. Got that one down right here.
That was an ouch.
But more concerned about, you know, what are those anticipated personnel costs, and when you developed the budget, what percentage did we increase personnel costs by to cover that gap?
Could we possibly go into an executive session at the end of day so that we can talk a little bit more broader about that, because we're already starting to line up people in the audience, and I don't want to get too far behind on things. But could you produce that ballpark by the end of the day, you think?
Well, I know what the percentages are right now,
Right.
but I
Right.
don't know. With being in this meeting all day, no. I could maybe do it by tomorrow, do a dollar amount, but I certainly cannot do it by the end of the day because we're here all day.
We could definitely tell you percentages, ballpark percentages, yes.
If you went into an executive. I defer to county council of what
I
we can
certainly
review.
don't want anybody walking through the mud on this, but we have an obligation, you know, to make sure that we're asking the right questions. And if we're going to build in a budget, a budget is, in, you know, the way that I always say it, it's an estimate of what you're going to spend next year, and we want to get our estimate as close as we can. Again, we all recognize that there is no way to go into the next year without probably taking some money from the road funds. Having said that, the idea is to limit the amount of those dollars we're taking out. Good knowledge about what the county's revenue resources are to the best possible estimate is helpful in doing that, and knowing what our employment costs are for personnel is really critical in doing that as well. Otherwise, it's very difficult to say, yeah, that's the number, let's vote.
So could we look till tomorrow morning and have
I'd
an
like to know
executive session early?
I'd like to know exactly what I'm being asked to produce. If you just want to know what percentages that are basically in here, or you want the exact dollar amounts?
It's a little bit, it's both. It's how did we get to the number that's in the proposed budget? What methodology was used to that? What number did we utilize? And that should tie into whatever was negotiated with each one of those prospective unions, I would imagine.
I have a question on that. County Council, the Sheriff's Department is not an open negotiation, so even though we know what's on the table, can I reveal it?
Right. So
Even in an executive session with the Budget Committee?
yeah, because they can't disclose it, so that's not a disclosure of that information. But in the meantime, again, I think what might make the most sense is if you just, without disclosing any details of the labor negotiations, you disclose whether your budget includes an increase in personnel costs, and then what perhaps either the percentage or dollar for dollar of any given group of employees would be.
Okay.
I've already gone through it, and I've seen there's a distinct increase. I'm just asking
Okay.
for
Well-
parameters. Again, my goal is to be as transparent as possible.
Well, I think I could provide,
Some of the things we can't be transparent
I
on.
totally understand that.
I think I could provide dollar numbers. I'm just not sure if I look at,
I also, if I could, Mr. Chair, based on what you just said, where you've looked and you've compared the dollar for dollars, would this be something that you might be able to talk to the county accountant and myself with on a break, and then we could perhaps clarify some of the points you're trying to make and then bring it back in a message for everyone?
I hear what you're saying. I'm not trying to expose anything. I'm just trying to satisfy my mind, because
I think we're having a hard time figuring that part out, though.
well, we're
And-
trying to do a budget, and if you're going to do a budget, you want to get your costs exact. We need to know what the revenue is coming in. We need to know what we're spending. It's as simple as that. I feel like I'm starting shaky on the marijuana thing, not feeling like I'm sort of chasing my tail around there. I'm feeling better about that number. But it's the same thing. You're asking, or we have to submit a budget in a certain time frame, and I would like to get this done this week in an orderly fashion and be as transparent as we can. I do not want anyone to put themselves in a position that would jeopardize themselves or the county or any other individual. I'm going to be really clear about that. But I'm trying to do my part. And in doing that part, I have questions, and my questions aren't meant to gum up the works. By asking this question now, I don't have to ask it every time we go through every single department. And it doesn't have to be answered right at this moment. I agree, we're currently behind schedule, and we need to move forward, so we can take this up later on this afternoon or sometime tomorrow if that's okay with everybody else.
Yeah.
I'm good.
That way we're not belaboring the point.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The only thing that I want to say, though, is that the increase is from this, if you look at the payroll costs from this adopted budget to next adopted budget, that's a dollar amount of increase. So,
Well, not necessarily, because there might be additional deputies on, like a sheriff's budget.
Yeah,
There might be
but
additional
in
deputies,
the
those kind of
general
things in there.
sense,
So you
without
got to compare
saying-
apples to apples.
so I can tell you what the increases in staffing is, but this the increase in from one year to the next on static staffing is the change of the payroll in the personnel service lines. So I'm not, I'm still not really clear on what I'm going to be providing in a, by tomorrow. I mean, I don't have, I have very, very little time
We
to
don't need to provide
do it.
anything. We've got a couple of days here. I don't want
Okay.
to cause anybody any undue stress.
I just want to be clear because I only have a very short time to produce it. I want to
understand.
know exactly what you want me to produce so I could get it done and not try to figure it out while I'm trying to produce it.
And you and I share the same concern. We only have a week to do this.
Yes.
And I have a very limited scope here, and I'm just trying to process. So let's table that part of it
Okay.
for now, and then perhaps this afternoon, if we have some time, or tomorrow morning, we'll have another discussion, and then we'll see what we can process, what we can legally do. So having said that, let's move back to finance and PR.
Well, I'd like to actually move to juvenile, and that would be on tab 10, page 58.
Did anyone have any other questions on finance?
Well, we can go back to it, but I'd like Wendy to be able to do her budget because she's sitting here.
Could you, I'm sorry. I would like to just finish with you and then we'll move along. I hate to postpone people. I totally understand that, but
Okay.
it also just, I don't want to keep going back and forth. I want to stay focused in one area and then check that off.
Okay, so for the accounting department, what I passed out was, it's just to demonstrate of how I come up with my travel budget. I encourage other departments to do something similar, figure out where they're going to be for the next, what meetings they're going to attend for the next year, and estimate the cost of those meetings. So my travel budget is the spring and the fall Oregon Government Finance Officers Association meetings, and CASEL, which is our accounting software training. That one depends on where they hold the training. So I know that next year it's going to be Las Vegas, which I hate Las Vegas, but that's where they're holding it. So that's the, then there's also some CASEL training that's for my staff, and they go to Silverton, and so half of it is, the cost of that is payroll, and half of it is this finance department. So that half that's finance is added to my travel, which gives us the total finance budget for travel. So I don't think anything else has really changed in my budget, except for, like I mentioned before, that our liability insurance did increase, and so it increased for everybody, and so my increase of the spread.
So if I look on line 7, that's a pretty substantial increase.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay.
Over what was budgeted, because I think the amount that was budgeted was not adequate for what actually happened this year.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions for Louise?
Mr. Chair,
Sir.
just quickly, and just food for thought, I just, question justifying putting anybody on an airplane. That goes for commissioners. Nowadays, with what we're faced with, it's hard for me to communicate with to communicate that to the taxpayers that flights, even good deals, are justified with the struggles we're having in our budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Louise.
The next one is the payroll personnel department, which is page 158. Same tab. No, this budget has not changed except for personnel costs and payroll, or the general liability insurance. Basically, everything else is the same for that department.
Okay. Thank you, Louise. Ms. Lang, are you ready? I apologize about the delay. Thank you.
What page was that again?
It was tab 10.
58.
58.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Let me do a quick overview, or how would you like me to proceed?
It's your show.
Okay. So I'll just give a quick overview of the last year. There's not a lot changing in our new budget. The majority of ours is payroll for personnel. When I took over in July of the fiscal year, a major change happened. Originally, Parks and Juvenile Department had a partnership where we worked under one director. Starting July, that changed. It was split into two separate directors. And shortly after that, Parks separated from the Juvenile Department, and Juvenile Department was kind of left in a little tough situation. We had no community service coordinator. Parks was also paying for part of our admin, and that left us about $10,000 short. And OYA had moved out of our office, so we had to get pretty creative at the beginning of the year. We've made some changes. I think I've updated the board before. We've done some regional offices. We have two Brookings locations. The school has allowed us free rent, and Veterans Affairs has allowed us to pay for the costs of internet, and we also have an office there. So we're saving a lot on transportation and mileage in our vehicles. I no longer take a vehicle home, so that has saved us quite a bit out of the budget. If there's a crisis situation or I'm on call or looking to do a transport, of course we do that. I'm also still taking on-call rounds while our staff gets fully trained. That's, again, saving us about $5,000 a year. We've moved our office admin, was across the hallway. And so whenever the office admin was gone, we had to hire irregular employee. We've moved that all together. There's no irregular employee costs. We have a backup in the same office that can cover the front. We went without a PO and without admin for a couple months in there, and we're able to save some money. And the staff and myself went out and actually completed the community service contracts we had in place, so we did not lose that. And we were able to go ahead and get the income there. We also received a grant from Curry Community Health. Not only did this allow us to get everybody in and seen, but we were able to save from some of our UA cost, education for drug and alcohol costs. So with that, we were able to come out and cover the loss that we did with community service work right off the bat. We also became more efficient in our changes. The most exciting news is we've hired, well, hopefully on the 22nd, it will be on the consent calendar, we will hire a new community service coordinator. We've put things in place. We've recently purchased a storage container that it's at the road department and is 100% ours. We don't pay rent. We don't do any service for it. It's ours. It has all our equipment. And in previous years, the community service coordinator was a job that actually brought a lot of money into our department. So it's our hope that that is what this year is going to be about, is bringing back a community service coordinator, getting some contracts, and generating some revenue. With the move of our office admin across the hall, we've developed a training facility up there. We have a large screen TV, we have computer access, we have tables. I can't afford to send all my POs, most of our trainings in Salem. To do that is very expensive, and then I don't have anybody available. So we are going to do a lot of in-house training this year. And that's about the changes we've made. We've overspent some line items to make some of those changes, but we've saved cost in others. Will come in good this year. The only payroll is the change in our, the increase in payroll that's projected is really the change in our budget. I did put in for a vehicle. Our transport vehicles are over, we got 2 of them that are over 10 years old, getting about, I think, a little over 90,000 miles. So talked to Louise about maybe being creative either the end of this year. It looks like it'll be about a $24,000 cost. If we have those funds, we would pay for half of it out of this year and half of it out of next year. But that would be
Next year, half of it out of next year's budget, and then the other half out of the following year's budget.
correct.
I have a quick question, Ms. Lang. It's been a while since I've been with the county, like 5 years or so. And when we would buy a vehicle back then, the road department would float the money, and then the department would do a 4 to 5 year installment payment. That's not the practice anymore?
Not really. Right now, what they're doing is they're just buying the vehicles. But in this year and next year, we've got a couple of departments that are spreading it over more than 1 year. And juvenile being one of them, she's going to budget for $12,000 for next year and pay the other $12,000 in the following year. And there's several of them this year that are over 2 years. So some of them are paying out of, I think, Veterans is paying half and half, and or as much as he can, and then the rest. And I can't remember what the other department was that's doing a half and half this year.
What we've done with the road department is rather than go full term on these vehicles, keeping them 8-10 years and having all the maintenance issues with them down the road, with the government financing that we're allowed to buy them at, we can basically buy them cheap enough that if we keep them 2.5 years, we can sell them every 2.5 years and still have a 6-month warranty, full warranty on these vehicles, because none of them will reach the mileage. What we can sell these vehicles for in 2.5 years versus what we pay for them is going to be basically a break even. So that's why we thought if we could stretch them over 2 or 3 years and have a full payment and reduce the cost of our motor pool by being able to resell them with the difference of government financing versus retail, we'll be able to, I want to say, get pretty close with what it cost us. The county's motor pool expense should drop significantly.
So just a follow-up question. So if Director Lang is spending $24,000 over 2 years for a vehicle, and let's say that vehicle is $24,000, at the 2.5 year point, you sell that vehicle, and let's say we get $18,000 for that vehicle. Does that $18,000 go into the road department fund, or is it sort of
It goes back to their
juvenile?
So what she would do is if she sold it, she would budget to receive the funds for the sale of vehicle and then budget for the purchase price of the new vehicle.
Good. Thank you. Please continue.
And I think that pretty much wraps it up. Our materials and services are right where they were last year. We have a superior staff right now. Everybody's on board. We have full caseloads. Our numbers are up, and I think we have shown that we're extremely efficient this year in the changes that we have made. So I'm not projecting any. Still have some detention days, no new money there. So I think things are going good.
So the increase in her budget for like materials and services is due once again to the liability insurance increases and also admin increases. Admin costs for the Commissioner's Office and also for IT have gone up quite a bit, and we'll talk about that when we go over those budgets, but it's hit everybody's budget that has admin costs to them. And another thing that that Ms. Lang didn't talk about, but we did this year, and we just started it, is that she had several grants. They were kind of being administered out of her department, but they had to be hand tracked in her office and was taking an awful lot of time. So what we did was we moved those donated grants to our state and local grant fund, so that she just has to do a printout to see what her costs are and her revenues are in those grants. So it's taken a lot of bookkeeping off of her assistant's desk, and all they have to do is code it to those grants. And
we actually have a fundraising grant, and the employees do that of their own time. They do 1 or 2 fundraisers a year, put money into a grant, and all those monies are spent on at-risk youth. So it doesn't come out of our budget or general fund. That's if we have to transport a kid to Prineville. If we have a kid who graduates, we might do a celebration lunch for them. If they need socks, shoes, anything like that, it comes out of that fund.
And those funds are now being tracked separately in a different place so that they're not within her general fund department.
Is there a question?
Yeah, more of a comment. Thank you for the time that you spent with me last week going over what you were doing. I left that meeting extremely impressed. I have some limited juvenile experience in my past years of law enforcement, and I think you're on the right track, and you should be commended.
Thank you.
How about your detention? I'm sorry.
I just had a question for Ms. Lang. I noticed that this year you're adding $500 into the account for courthouse lawn mowing.
Yes.
And I have to say, first of all, I know your juveniles have been mowing the front yard. It looks great. I'm glad they're doing it. Lawn mowing isn't typically fall under a juvenile department, so I'm just curious, if we are giving $500 to Ms. Lang's department, is that $500 then being deducted from our maintenance department?
It's a not so much deducted, but it's an expenditure in the occupancy department that is paying for that service to be done. Much like there was a line in our airport that the expense was lawn mowing, and so the money would come here and the expense would be in the airport.
Okay, I just want to make sure that your department isn't being charged extra or having to pay extra for that, because you're really doing it as a service to the entire
that's why
county.
it says it's an intergovernmental service, lawn mowing, because that's a revenue. Occupancy has it as an IGS expenditure, intergovernmental services.
Thank you.
Yes.
Are your folks up for hire in personal areas rather than just governmental? Just curious.
Our community service kids?
Mhm.
Yeah, actually our crew goes out to the tune of about $265, and that's what we do with ODOT and other agencies. As long as it's a nonprofit company, then it is considered community service.
Well, I was going to say my home needs.
Oh,
Willing to pay
yeah,
here.
it's got to be that. It's got to be that nonprofit status.
Oh,
I got
okay.
a ranch you can mow.
Good answer, Ms. Lang. I'm
Just trying to get you some extra revenue.
Well, and I think the community service has kind of been a big piece, and I think once we get that back and have a coordinator in, then we can actually move forward, and we'll see some good things.
I think you're doing a great job, by the way. Thank you.
Thank you.
You were very conscientious in how to take care of your money there.
I have a good team over there, a really good team.
And you feel good with your detention budget at $23,000? Is that pretty much where you guys are staying, or have you had some cost overruns in the last couple of years?
We're doing pretty good there because we are really, well, and times have changed. Locking them up isn't the answer anymore. We now have 2 monitors. If I don't put anybody in detention, I shouldn't even say that out loud because That's going to happen. If nobody goes in detention in about the next 45 days, we're going to buy a new electronic monitor. And we've really been trying to use electronic monitors. We are doing a lot of prevention work and daily check-ins with probation officers to try to keep them out of detention. What we have right now, the $20,000 is Del Norte, and it's a contract that's continued through the years. But there's certain kids that Del Norte can't take. They won't take anybody that's 18. And so long-term, they don't have a Polycom for kids to appear in court. So the extra $3,000 is Josephine County or Douglas, who will allow long-term stay or 18-year-olds at their facility. And we have had to use that twice this year.
Okay.
But
It just seems like a low number to me.
We've been, well, you know, the number of OYA Curry kids is down drastically. And a lot of the OYA kids waiting for placements and something would use a lot of our detention days, and we're not seeing, those numbers are just extremely low. But I think having people all over the county kind of helps too. We just did electronic monitor this morning. They're good. They track kids, and it allows them to go to school and work and still be a part of the community.
Any other further questions for Ms. Lang? Nice job. Thanks very much.
Thank you for
We're
letting me
15
come in
minutes.
early. I appreciate it.
Well, it wasn't really, actually, thank you for your patience. We were late. We're 15 minutes behind schedule. We had an 11 o'clock break. I would ask that we all take a 15-minute break at this point. We're going to begin at 11:30. Thank you. Ms. Vick? Trying to run it. Budget committee is back in session. It's currently 11:31 a.m. We're picking up at Title III, please. And I'm sorry, Julie, did you have something?
Yes, I just wanted to make a clarification on something that was discussed earlier, and that was there was some confusion or discussion on the marijuana revenues. So I just wanted to share with you what I have received on those marijuana revenues. So I did ask the state a couple months ago whether or not we could divulge these numbers, and they did say that basically statutes have been amended to allow local government to disclose the payment distribution amounts that DOR sends for the 3% taxes, and for us that is $13,575. They go on to say that DOR itself cannot disclose the other amount without a confidentiality clause, which I have signed, and it goes on to say that we're, according to the person writing the email, we've told folks that it's up to them to interpret the statute since it doesn't apply, but that our reading of it is that it is best to disclose the total net amounts distributed, inclusive of any penalties, refunds, or interest. And for our sake, that would be altogether $161,556.88. So you have $13,575, that's on the 3%, and you have $147,980 on the 17%, for a total of $161,556.88.
Thank you. And please, Title III.
Title III. So I handed out where we were at the end of June 30th, 2018 on Title III funds. We have three different amounts because the three different Title III funds were restricted in different ways. The first fund was anything that we had left over from prior to 2008 distributions. And then we have the distributions that were assigned to projects from 2008 to 2011. And then once again, after 2011, the title funds received were restricted to search and rescues, active searches, cost only. So the projects that we had is Firewise has 43,563. The GIS project has 38,951. The Towers has 24,925. There were several projects that had released, and then also interest earned on those tower dollars. And then the prior to the 2008 dollars is a total of 110,762. And the BLM search and rescue is 290,111. And the search and rescue for forest, federal forest is 670,472. And so I also had been looking at the two funds that are using these Title III funds but running out of money. So Towers, it shows what it was used in the past 3 years and what is available for the current year that we're in now. And then, so basically you can see that
What do you need, JJ?
the Towers will be, pardon me? Oh, sorry. So it's showing that the Towers project money will be finished this year. And the marine projects were, they last, in the 2017-18, used released funds to fund Marine Patrol. And in 2018-19, $30,000 is budgeted to use. And that would be using those released funds, the one highlighted in blue above. So the released and prior to the 2008 funds available for future projects at the end of this year will be about $80,000. So I think that there's new money came in this year and the prior year that are SRS funds. So a small amount came in to about $100,000, $130,000 came in per year on those one-time 2-year extension of the SRS. So there's about maybe $200,000 that is not as restricted as the money that was coming before. In other words, it can be used for these other projects and does not have to be restricted to search and rescue. So that's where we are on what we have left in title funds. What we have left right now going forward is these dollars because they don't fund the Title III any longer out of the federal government. Only if they renew that SRS again.
I have a question for you, Louise, on the
Sure.
Firewise. Which department is using those funds?
It's not one of our departments. Title III funds could be applied for by different entities, and right now the Coos Forest Protection Agency, CFPA, has those Firewise dollars.
And the GIS is through the assessor's office.
The GIS is not in this assessor's office, but it's a department within the general fund. But it hasn't had to use any Title III funds in quite a few years because the activity is fairly low. We're contracting through Lane County for services.
Okay. Any other questions for Louise on Title III? Thank you. Unemployment PERS, please.
And just so you know, of course, Title III was tab 31, and it's very generically budgeted. So all of these budgets are basically budgeting for the entire revenue and then budgeting expenditures against those revenues, very generic. So the next one is unemployment. God, it's really unemployment and PERS, which are now in the reserve fund, which is tab 30. So PERS is on page 207. So that's the old PERS fund. It's now, because that was Fund 311, so you can see that the revenue has to come in to the fund it was the prior year, and then it's going to be transferred to Fund 310. So it's, right now it's 311. Next year it'll be 310 under the reserve account with the other reserve funds. So the PERS itself is on page 203. 203. Oh, very small fund. Okay, it's at the bottom of page 203. So this has the transfer coming in from the reserve fund as its revenue. PERS does not, this is a reserve fund that was set up, I don't even know how many years ago. It doesn't even say. So in the past it was set up, a PERS reserve fund. It's supposed to offset PERS increases in the PERS rate, which is, there's only 220,000 in there. It's not like it's going to do anything to this PERS rate. What happens though is that when people retire, they report to PERS every place they've worked that was PERS related job. And sometimes they were qualified for PERS, but the employer did not actually take it out. I come from school districts where it happened a lot with substitute teachers, because your district might not be taking it out because they were substituting in 4 districts at the same time. They actually did qualify for PERS, but they didn't qualify in your district. But you wouldn't know about the other 3 districts. And so sometimes these things come back years and years and years later, 30 years later when they retire. And so the PERS just says, hey, you owe $4,500 in PERS payments for this employee, and basically you have to pay it. So what this PERS reserve fund is actually being used for those things that come in like that. They come in every once in a while. If you look at the history on here, nothing has come through for a while, but within the 10-year history, there were a few that came through. They don't come in very often, but they do once in a while.
So you're not adding to this anymore? It's
This
just
does
a
not get
static
added to,
account.
it's only what is in there right now.
Okay.
The unemployment reserve fund is just above there, the first part of the top of the page. Money comes in here from payroll. So when we pay payroll, we're self-insured for unemployment. So we do collect a little bit off of every payroll, and then it goes over here to fund for any unemployment incidents that happen during the year. So if you look on line 21, in 16-17, we paid out of this fund $35,800 in unemployment costs. In the 2017-18, we paid $7,442. So this does have money coming in. Once in a while, it gets built up to where the budget committee might suggest transferring out some of the carryover and transferring that to the general fund. But
What would be your recommendation with this amount?
Um,
Leave it as is?
I'm thinking it's budgeted to carry over about 200,000. So about 50,000 comes in a year. I mean, it's kind of on that cusp right now, whether or not it has too much in it, or we should take some back out of it. It could have some taken out of it, but then again, it might be next year that you do that. If you take anything out, I would not recommend anything over $100,000.
Good answer. Thank you. And it appears as though the last one is grants.
Grants, my favorite. So grants are Fund 250 and 251. They are tab, what is that? Tab 28. So a couple of years ago, I recommended setting up funds that were just for grants. Too many grants were like trying to be tracked within a department. So if they had grants, they would be tracked with a special number within a department. So to get the amount of revenue and expenditures just for that grant was kind of difficult. So I recommended setting up these federal grant funds and then a state and other restricted revenues grant fund. In this budget, when I consolidated all of the funds, one of the funds that was sitting by itself was the federal grant, which is VOCA, which is Victims Assistance Grants. So this time I'm budgeting the VOCA basic grant within the federal funds, and it moved from Fund 212. The next grant would be their VOCA one-time grant, which was already within these grant funds. I budgeted for that. It's a pretty generous budget. I think it ends in September of 2019. So it just is kind of a placeholder for that grant. I don't know how much money is going to be left over at the end of this year, but it'll have to be spent by September. The next two grants are also VOCA grants. They're I don't know what SST stands for. You have to ask the federal government. And then they have another one called VOCA Expansion. Those are two fairly new grants. And then the next grant was the 2015-17 Justice Reinvestment Grant, which is completed. And the next grant is the Justice Reinvestment Grant from 2017-2019. And that is budgeted for. And budgeting for the Brookings Head Start facility. So those are all the federal money grants that are budgeted. And then the next fund is the state and other grants funds. And within that one, what we budgeted for is what we call the DSART grant. It's a grant with Oasis Shelter Homes. And we've added the grant the criminal fines grant is state funded for victims assistance. And then there's a victims assistance program from the Justice via Investment Grant. And then the elections purchasing their voting machine, restricted funds and outlay. And then the 3 juvenile grants that we talked about earlier today, the Curry Health Foundation grant donation, the Curry Community Health donation, and then their fundraising monies. So we're keeping those separate from her regular budget. So there's not a lot to to these grants. Just make sure that they're budgeted for. A lot of times they're budgeted in a generous way, just to make sure that we can spend the grant.
I've got kind of a general question about grants. I was talking to an individual about capturing some indirect costs for the county. Are there any administrative fees that go to the county for administering all these grants presently?
Well, the first handout today, there are the first handout, which is the admin fees spread to departments. At the bottom in the yellow, there's actually 3 grants that use admin fees. One is the VOCA assistance grant. It's a it was a total, so they're spread through the admin fees. And then the VOCA basic grant has amount for finance. So those are budgeted in the grants to pay admin fees for, and they are budgeted in the admin fees to receive those revenues.
And I guess one of the big grants I was thinking about was the Head Start grant, where there were no
There was nothing
negotiated
written,
administrative fees there.
when grants are applied for, a lot of times the grant application, the applier indicates how much they're going to cost to the grant administration fees.
Okay, let me just say this. I'll make it brief. I think this is something we really need to work on, and I'll talk with Julie about it, because I was told that you had to negotiate like a maximum of these indirect costs in order for you to do this.
A lot of grants have a ceiling on how much you could claim for admin fees, similar, usually around 5%.
Okay, I was told by an individual that you could go up to even 30%.
It depends on how much, when you're writing the grant, what it's for, and how much administrative oversight that grant needs. Most of them don't allow you to do that much.
Yeah, well, I'm just
oversight.
thinking that instead of us doing like all the administration work on the Head Start grant, which we're doing, huge amount, we need to really think about this in the future. I'm not, I'm not blaming or anything at this point. So.
That's just during the application part when you do that. My experience with grants, especially federal grants, has been, of course, with school districts. And there isn't enough money to do what you need to do with the grant, and we rarely, if ever, included admin costs in our grant application.
Okay, well, I'm going to research a little bit
But it
deeper.
just depends on what you're trying to use those grants for, what you're trying to get accomplished, how much you can get, and how much you want to use of that for admin costs. It's totally up to the applicant.
Okay, well, I don't want to divert the conversation here too much, but I just think that's something that we really need to look into, and I will be
And
doing
sometimes,
that.
it makes a lot of sense to try to get those admin costs, especially if you have to do a lot of work on the grant. But if you're just doing something that basically almost takes care of itself and you really have little admin oversight, then you might just forego.
And I'm
admin.
sure it's going to depend on the grant, that's
Yeah.
for sure, but there are times when we're losing a lot.
Yeah.
Let's just put it that way.
I have a question. Did you say there was a grant purchase voting machines?
Yes.
Yes. We
I
had-
don't, go ahead.
Okay, so during this year, we got a loan from the state of Oregon to purchase the voting machines, and most of it was purchased, but there's a second payment, and it's about $30,000 that will be due in next year. So it actually will have, the loan proceeds will carry over the amount that, I don't know why they put it in two payments, but they did. So the other $30,000 will carry over to provide for the final payment of that.
Yeah, I don't want to jump ahead to her budget, but I thought I read in there that we were paying 4% interest on that amount, and that there were three payments, and one payment's already been made, another payment due this year. And I think that's something when her budget comes up, but I just was curious on the grant. You know, what...
Well, there's two pieces to it. One is purchasing the machine, which the loan proceeds purchased the machine. So those was done in stages, and I believe it's probably because they have setups and stuff, and they have to get the final how it finally worked before they make the last payment on it. Make sure that the person that
Hold on 1 second, please.
the person that or the company that put in the machine and set up the software and everything, that everything's working before they get their final payment. I think that's why that's the $30,000. The other part of the state of Oregon loan, I didn't memorize what the interest rate on that is, but it's a 5-year loan.
Commissioner Boyce?
This discussion was really very good. I was hearing fine, but just dropped off my notes that they were referring to voting machines. We mean vote calculator or tallying machines, correct?
It's the clear ballot system that the county clerk just purchased this year.
Yeah, still a little clear, but just
It's the clear ballot.
I know, but sometimes around the country, your voting machines that can be when we actually go into the ballot box. That's all I have. Thank you.
I'm not exactly sure. You probably have to ask the county clerk, but it's the clear ballot voting system that she purchased this year.
That helps. Thank you.
Any other questions? Just a quick comment, Commissioner Gold. So in our side of the world, when you apply for a federal grant, unless you negotiate a percentage for administrative fees with the federal government, you either get what they give you, or you can elect to take a 10% de minimis.
Well, I just think it's something we really need to look into.
So there's some information out there about that. Just
Okay.
sharing, but it's really easy to get to.
Okay.
And a lot of organizations just take the 10% de minimis grant, because all you have to do is elect to do that for your administrative and overhead costs. And it's as simple as that. But it depends on the grant. And that's just for the Fed. Everybody else has their own rules as well.
Okay, thank you.
So it looks like we're right on time. It's 11:58. Any final questions before we go to lunch? Hearing none, we'll reconvene at 1 o'clock. We caught up.
So I will start out with the commissioners. The biggest changes that we see there...
What page?
I'm sorry. Page 150.
Okay, it really helps to tell the page.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Even better than the tab.
All righty.
So the biggest changes that we have with the commissioner's budget is that we went from a full-time status for the 3 commissioners. And other than that, there's really not much of a difference from previous years. One thing we have done is we have implemented a travel policy this year to make sure that travel expenses do not get out of hand. Basically, expenses are limited to what you see here in the budget unless they go back to the board for an additional amount.
In the travel budget went from 4,500, which is 1,500 per commissioner, to a total of 15,000.
If you see me take out my phone, it's so I can use my calculator. I'm not texting or making phone calls. And to clarify, Julie, that means that all three commissioners are at the same rate.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
And maybe just to let you know, I don't take PERS, so that's a little bit of a savings there.
Yeah, it's about $2,500 in savings.
Yeah, I don't know.
Neither do I. What I wanted to ask a question if I could.
Please.
So I'm looking at historical data here back on page 76. These are the previous 2 years, and now we've moved it to a different area. Is that why we're down to page 150? I'm kind of confused.
Yes, one of these is one of the funds that we consolidated.
Okay.
So commissioners was sitting by itself, it's admin, and so it was moved into the admin fund. So the history is under the, was it page 150?
Page 76.
76.
76.
So
yeah.
let's just go to elected salaries. Is 131 in 17, 66.9, and I'm rounding numbers in 18, 127 in 19, correct?
I'm not looking at.
And that's back on page 76. I'm sorry.
Line item 24.
Right.
Correct.
If I may, Mr. Chair, at some point.
Yes. I'll give you the high sign when we're ready.
On page 76 on line 24, the adopted budget includes supplemental budgets. So there was a supplemental budget done in January or February because the commissioners did vote to restore those salaries at a board meeting during that period. So the adopted budget column reflects all supplemental budgets that were done as of the time the budget was done.
Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions about that? Commissioner Boyce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just at the beginning there of Director Snow's comment, the design was, if I understood correctly, to make sure the travel doesn't get out of hand. And then, of course, in the past, mentioned in comparison to the other years, since I'm the one that traveled the last couple of years with any significance, I wonder if that's directed at me, and if we do have a situation, or did have a situation, where the public feels that the travel got out of hand. I need clarification, please.
Well,
Director
I would, to make matters simple, I think we should just focus on this budget that we're processing for the next fiscal year. I think there might be some historical things that need to be processed, but I don't want to make that part of this session. We should be focused on our budget for next year.
The supplemental budget information that's on page 76, you have to add conference fees, travel, meals and lodging, assigned vehicle, motor pool, mileage allowance, and transportation. Those are all travel. The supplemental budget was done to bring that up to 15,000 this year.
Okay.
And so it's the same for what it currently is for next year.
So when I look at line 7, Louise, it says 6,100 in adopted this year, but you're saying that's 15,000, is that correct?
Well, if you look at the page 160.
Oh, 6 back there. Hang on.
Oh, sorry, that's the wrong one. Gotta go back to commissioners. Okay, so if you look on page 150, 150 and 151, on page 150, line 31, conference fees, line 37, travel meals and lodging, 38, assigned vehicles, 39, motor pool, and then the next page, lines 1 and 2, travel miles allowance and travel transportation. Those line items add up to 15,000.
Okay.
And those same line items on page
They had a-
77 also add up to 15,000 in this year's budget.
The line items you just announced were almost 20, a little over 20,000 actually.
19,000, almost 20 grand.
2,200,
Yep.
6,100,
4,300,
3,300, 3,000,
3,000,
3,000,
900,
900, and 150? No, that's it.
yeah.
19,500.
Huh, I wonder how I did that.
Got 4,500 too much in here.
I'll have to look at it, I'm sorry.
Not a problem.
I think I add those off to the side so I can look at it on my computer and see what I did.
Okay.
So the correct one is not the 24,000, it's 19. Excuse me.
Hold on. Go ahead.
So the correct one is not 24,699, it's 1519.
Oh,
Am I reading it wrong?
I don't think you're reading it wrong. They're doing a subcategory of that total.
Okay.
My understanding.
Yes.
So again, I want to try to get it back to its simple point. So the goal there was 15,000
Yes.
for ideally about $5,000 per commissioner.
For all three, yes.
For travel.
Yes.
Okay. That makes sense. I can go with that.
And
So,
let me look at what I have.
And so you know, any out-of-state transportation has to be approved by the board. It's just not at random.
so the IGS assigned vehicles, is that paying for a vehicle, or is that
It's a paying for the cost of using an assigned vehicle.
the mileage?
The mile,
Okay.
well, it's the rate per mile that's set by the road department, depending on what the costs of that vehicle or category of vehicles are.
And then what's the 3,000 motor pool, the distinction between assigned vehicle and motor pool?
Using a motor pool vehicle rather than an assigned vehicle.
Okay.
Sometimes there's assigned vehicles, sometimes they're motor pool. When they take a vehicle, I don't believe that, I think that was just kind of a historic place that they put the budget, but I don't believe that the commissioners have assigned vehicles anymore.
Chair,
Sir.
there's a comment from the audience. I don't know whether you want to take it.
David Barnes, I'll just be brief. Louise, your number came to 19.5. I believe if you look back in the record, that back in January, this body increased the travel budget by $15,000, not to $15,000.
I think that's true. I'm sorry, I did not.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes.
It was 215,000. I'm almost certain it was 2, but I could be 2.
So
Anyway.
could perhaps we take some time, not at the moment, but let's get this resolved, and tomorrow I'll add it to a short list of cleanup from today. Okay? I'm
So
making a note.
we can correct that budget to 15,000 if that's the desire of the budget committee.
Do we want to take a vote now to clear that up so it would be easy for you? Or
Make it a lot easier.
If you guys would like to do that, or if you'd like a little bit of time to discuss it amongst yourselves.
I'm fine with
Council Hunt,
15,000.
did you have a question?
Well, thanks. Is this, Louise, isn't this where you keep track of all of these over the days and then bring back the revisions at one time at the end?
Yes, so what I do is if you change it, then the column that says approved by budget committee changes. And then at the end, when you approve the budget, the dollar amount that's approved will be everything that's in the approved column rather than the proposed column, if you make changes.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to give you kind of a heads up of the process.
It sounds like the commissioners were on their path to correcting this.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I
At
think it
your
should be
leisure,
15
so what's
tops.
the end result?
I'm fine with changing it now. I don't know how Commissioner Boyce?
Yeah, I certainly go with the group. I think the figures will show that we are still under substantially the total amount from the two previous years before I came on board. Thank you.
No, that wasn't the question. The question was, but what we were wondering, Commissioner Boyce, was when we did this, we did it, I believe we did it at 15,000 was the budget. Mr. Barnes recollects that it might be at 19,500 in any matter. We're willing, or I would like to see it reduced back to 15, which is what I believe it was. And Commissioner Gold has said that she would lean that way as well. We were wondering what your thoughts were.
Yeah, as I said, I agree with both the group, and we'll be, I predict, substantially under that. Thank you.
And I'm looking at the worksheet for the commissioner's budget, and it looks like they did add $15,000 to basically the 4,500 and came up with the 19,500, and I just put those same dollar amounts in this year's budget as the
And that's why you're the numbers guy.
the budget with the supplemental, the original budget plus the supplemental. So that's what's in this year's budget.
So for us, we're ready to, we can take it back to 15, it's fine.
Is that a realistic figure? I mean, I'm not sure what your travels are in the county, but I think, in my opinion, then for the future, that networking is going to be very important to get this county back online. As I think you took a trip to Washington, D.C. to meet with Merkley. So
To help with the budget, though, I paid for part of that privately, so.
great, and I appreciate that, and I'm sure everybody does. But
And I think, you know, Commissioner Boyce does traveling as well, and I know he's paid for part of his trips privately, so I think we're starting with 15, and if we need to, leaving it
Okay.
to 15, and if we need to make a budget revision down the road, then we can, but I think
Well,
15 is the...
if you leave it at the 19.5 and just know that you're trying to keep under 15, that it doesn't require any more action.
that doesn't mean you have to use it.
It doesn't mean you have to use it,
That's
but
fine.
it's there.
However, yeah.
I don't have a problem with the 15 either, but I'm just
Okay.
wanted to know.
Yeah.
So do you want me to change it to 15, or do you want to leave the budget as is for now and just know that next year you try to keep this funding under 15?
Well, in essence, in respect of time, let's just leave it the way it is for now, then we'll just...
That's fine.
Go forward with it.
Okay.
We can move this along. Are you okay with that, Commissioner Boyce?
Yes, thank you again.
Okay.
So I have another question. Has the elected official compensation board met yet this year? And have they made any?
The report is due on Wednesday morning at 11:15. They actually provide the report to the Budget Committee,
Okay.
and the Budget Committee votes to accept the report. Whether or not they incorporate anything from that report into the budget, they discuss at that time.
Okay, perfect.
So,
Julie?
Okay, IT, is that the next one?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, so with IT,
What page?
IT is page 159.
Okay, thanks.
Have a handout?
Louise has a handout.
I gave you yours already, that's for everybody else.
Okay.
Pass them all. I gave you yours, but I have another one if you want.
Yeah.
oh, wait, there we go. All right, now we got it. We got an extra.
So there were, starting out with IT this year, I questioned some of the expenses. We were seeing monthly charges of $12,000 a month, which seemed quite high for a contracted IT service. So I worked with Daniel Springer, who is our contact at CCEC, and he shared some data with me which was quite alarming. One was that he broke down and showed exactly where those expenses were, and a lot of the expenses that we were incurring is due to what I'll call worker error, where it's just easier to call IT than trying to figure it out ourselves. Since then, we've had some conversations with staff, and we have been able to reduce those numbers somewhat. The other thing we did was we had asked him for a 5-year plan to look at what it's going to cost to keep this system running. So he's given us those numbers. But we've also looked at the individual computers that everyone is using and who needs to be replaced and who doesn't. And that was very alarming as well. I do have a sheet for you here, which Louise, would you hand out? Sure. Just kind of inventories where we're at on our computers, and it shows the need, why we have some fluctuations and why we have some high expenses right now. When you look at this, you'll find that most of the computers that we're using in the county are actually at the end of their life. So we've asked Daniel to actually start giving us a schedule of when these can be replaced so that we're not all sitting here without computers. I know myself, mine constantly crashes, takes up a lot of time. We're starting to replace some of them, but basically we've ignored the maintenance of our IT system, and the result is we need to start putting money into the budget to replace those computers and to maintain the software that we have. So
the on the 5-year plan, the first purple one where it says desktop PCs and laptops, $41,418. That is the start of replacing obsolete computers in the county, and that replacement, I don't have that.
Is it my understanding some of these computers, they won't even take the software programs anymore that we require?
Yes, one of the problems is this, the software, Microsoft licensing. You used to buy your licensing when you put it on your computer, and now I believe it's more like an annual maintenance fee for licensing. So the software that's on these computers are no longer supported because they don't have the late enough version of Microsoft to be covered by their licensing anymore. They're not supporting those versions. So what we're looking at is basically departments were budgeting to replace their own computers, and so it was really kind of up to the department whether or not they budgeted to replace computers, and we'd like to move that more into the IT department replaces county computers so we don't get in this situation in the future.
This is also by going through having IT do it, we're guaranteeing everyone's getting the same computers, the same pricing, and that they're added to that schedule so we know whose computer needs replacing and when, how old it is, what type of information is on it. Basically, I guarantee you there's no fluff in here. It's just a matter of saying, what does it take for us to keep operating? Because we have been ignoring those expenses in the past.
I have a couple of comments on this section. First of all, I think that those costs are really super high. That's a lot. Secondly, you might want to investigate the platform instead of continuing to work off that Microsoft Dell product, moving over to a Google Chrome product, which we did. Google controls all their own stuff, so you're not getting those. Like every time you turn on a Dell, it seems like there's an update. You don't get that same update process on Google because you're doing everything through the cloud. So they're maintaining their product. A thin client, which is a small Chromebook, is just as functional as a regular Dell computer. The difference being you don't need 500 gigabyte of memory. You only need a 64 gigabyte memory because everything is being done virtually. It's not on the host. The cost of a Google computer is $300.
So is that like a laptop?
Yes.
And would it be sufficient for the sheriff and their?
But you can get an external keyboard. We have people that run dual monitors off those Chromebooks. They run all the peripherals that everything else runs off of. It doesn't change anything except $300 and $1,400 for a Dell laptop.
Are there any cybersecurity issues with that
Actually, it's
system?
more secure with Google than it is with a Microsoft product.
Well,
So-
what's Bill Gates going to do? I'm kidding.
I'm just suggesting you might go that course and do an investigation. Can you use those? And we have about a dozen laptops that are less than 3 years old, and we'll just give them to the county. They're Dell products. They're the same things that you guys use, because when we left, we just kept getting the same thing we were getting. But we're just going to give those to you guys. We're going to wipe them out. You'll have to rebuild them and load them, but we're going to give them to you free at no cost. But I'd suggest taking a look at that Google platform. I think, I don't know, it's not this year, but I think at some point it might be easier for you guys to think about having your own IT department again, because those costs do seem really high.
We might want to set up a meeting with Springer. Not getting wrong.
Would you like him to come and do something before the committee, or?
No, let's do it after. Let's
Okay.
get through this budget season.
Okay? Ready to move on to BOC office. Any questions, comments?
Well, with the BOC office, I think,
What page?
again, I'm sorry, page 152.
On what?
152?
Yeah, if the table of contents were alphabetical, it would be pretty easy, so we have to get pages there.
Well, I know where everything is. So.
I know, you're just the guru.
So we really haven't changed much in this budget at all, other than the fact of basically how we allocate the funding for my position. We are going towards a system of my position being half funded through community development and half funded as Department of Operations. So that does have some impact on how this is calculated. Other than that, we're not looking to add any additional staff or software other than just continuing with status quo, how we are operating.
It does have a reduction of the 15,300 that I believe County Administrator Hitt had me put in for some special board meeting software, and then County Administrator Schroeder did a different approach where this Google Docs. So that was taken out because we don't intend on buying that other software to do manage our paperwork for our commissioner meetings. So it went from $30,000 down to $13,000 for materials and services in this fund.
Okay. Any questions? Looks like we're on code enforcement. Page number, please.
Code enforcement is page 65. And 66. So the biggest change you're going to see in code enforcement is currently we are at a .25 full-time equivalent. Mr. Fortman works basically at 25% of the time. And with the coming budget, we are proposing that he become full-time.
It was a .5. So half of him was here, actually in the general fund, and the other 0.25 was in public health,
Okay.
environmental.
Okay, so in our budget, it shows up as 0.25 just because of public health is a separate budget?
Yes.
Okay.
So he's going from a 0.5 total FTE to a full FTE.
Okay. And I know that is the way we did bring it to the board, was to change it from a 0.5 to a full-time.
And what's the funding allocation? If it's going to go to full-time, how much general fund, how much public health or other divisions?
It's 0.25 here. This is when we discussed non-departmental, that 0.25 was in non-departmental, and to track the costs of code enforcement better, we have moved it to its own department. So now it's in the general fund, 0.25 here, and then he's also 0.25 in planning, 0.25, which is also in the general fund, 0.25 in building, and 0.25 continuing to be in public health, environmental services.
Okay, thank you.
So I just want to say something about this program. Just in the short time that it's been operating, we've seen great strides. In the first 4 months of the program, Mr. Fortman was able to act on 52 code violations, and in the following 4 months, he added another 70. So in 8 months' time, he has a caseload of 122 cases. He's doing an excellent job. He's very well respected. He's been getting compliance the easy way. He has a demeanor which can get people to comply with him without the need for citations. However, there are some cases that we are going to have to use citation authority on. He's been, I think, an asset to the community, whereby he's really shown people that the county is listening and we're willing to do something. Helps clean up the county. I think it helps people have faith again in the fact that government is listening, hopefully look better for when the tourists come. But his expenses are relatively low. We are getting him a truck this year with a radio in it that is coming in out of the pool vehicles that we've been working on. Aside from that, just here to answer questions if you have them.
He will also be doing some like dogs and stuff like that.
Animal control.
Animal control. With the new truck, we're going to get him a cage for the back of it with a cover on it. And he was also law enforcement for a long time as well, so he understands a lot of local and state laws. So he's got a really good background. Nice guy.
One other comment, he's working with the fire departments as they go out. If they find infractions and so forth, they'll be helping that way too. So it's not just people calling in. So I think that's good.
I think this position's been needed for years. I've been saying that for at least 6 years that I can think of in the county. Yes, Commissioner Boyce.
So thank you again. As most of you know, I've been advocating for 2 full-time employees on this program. I know I'll be subject to board approval, but there is so much work out there. Hopefully we can really be looking forward to at least another half-time employee, perhaps second full-time. But I will comment on that at this time.
Thank you.
Another
Yes, sir.
question. Will he be dealing with the assessor's office if he comes across property that's been developed without the proper permits? And you see this a lot in Wallowa County, where they're building barns and calling them homes, putting homes on top. Will that be part of his role?
Yes, as a matter of fact, he's already been working with the assessor's office, and we've seen some numbers already on people that have not received permits. Had they received permits, what effect that would have had on the assessor's role. It also increases the numbers in the planning and the building departments. If you're required to now get a permit, of course that increases the revenues in the building safety and the planning departments, increases the tax rolls. So there is really a multiple effect on this. I do just want to add that Commissioner Pash and I have had a conversation about perhaps this position being rolled under community development so that he has access to administrative staff, so he is not bothered down with a lot of the typing and data entry and can spend more time in the field. So that is a change hopefully we'll see moving forward with this position.
Okay.
And that's something else we've talked about down the road is we may have to look for someone in the office to do a little bit of the legwork and, you know, part-time, we're actually looking at, because we have a few extra minutes, possibly having some, you know, high school students come in and work under Julie to do some learn administrative parts in government, and possibly have to hire someone part-time administratively for like an administrative secretary to help deal with a lot of the paperwork, because it's starting to really bog him down, and an active office, as you know, needs some help. So JJ's a little overwhelmed at times.
So we are a little bit early. It's 1:34. Looks like Mr. Dunmeyer is here, correct? Dumeyer, sorry. That's why I need to wear my glasses. Yes.
Well, my apologies, I'm gonna sign off and go to a different board meeting, and then, so I'll be at the Capitol later this afternoon, but I'll listen to Mr. Dumeyer's presentation and questions later this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about the mispronunciation. I'm wearing my glasses now.
That's right, I get it quite often, actually.
What page?
Yes, what page?
Oh, I saw that one a minute ago too.
Have a big
It's like
mess.
10.
It's tab 11
Oh, 11. I was close.
and
Page 61.
And thanks for coming early.
Of course. So for the record, Jeremy Dumeyer, Curry County Emergency Management. My budget, just kind of start there, half of it comes from the general fund. The other half is from the Emergency Management Performance Grant. So when you look at the total budget, this year, the county portion is a little more than $60,000 for my entire office. With that, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
And who are you reporting to? You're reporting to the Director of Administration, is that correct?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Just a side note on that, this is another one of the departments that Chair Pash and I have talked about whether or not they need to be rolled under community development to have access to administrative services so they can spend more time on the professional matters versus keyboarding and claims, things of that nature.
Thank you. Does anyone have any other questions for Mr. Dumeyer?
that was
Excellent.
easy.
Thank you.
Have you ever been told that before? You're easy?
Usually. Thank you.
Uh-oh. Trouble walked in.
Well, I say we just keep rolling. Mr. Bowdy.
Page 68, 69.
How you guys doing today?
Good. How are you?
Hanging in there on vertical. Tony from Veteran Services.
So it's your show?
So basically the budget is pretty close to what it was last year. Kind of a repeat, but I know it's a new cruise, so I don't know if you have any general questions about it.
Well, I was just glad to see that there was 2,000 less coming from the general fund.
Well, if you're looking at the adopted with a supplemental, that actually is budgeted the exact same as it was last year's adopted budget.
Oh, okay.
This budget does have the vehicle replacement that's spread over 2 years. On page 69, line 9, some of that $27,000 is actually moving up to line 5, $12,000. So he's paying $12,000 now in this budget and $12,000 in next year's budget, and that is because of a restriction on capital assets being purchased out of the veterans funding.
And again, Chair, so you know, we're moving all the vehicles from the motor pool, different departments into the same 3-year plan as our intent.
Okay.
So I have kind of a question regarding the vehicles. I notice it's a total of 24,000. What kind of a vehicle can you get for, you can get a truck for 24?
Four-wheel drive, King Cab, Dodge pickup truck on government finance. That's what I'm saying, in 3 years we'll be able to sell these for probably more than we paid for.
Because I've seen those same kinds of trucks for like 50 grand.
Those diesels, those are probably more diesels. So.
Yeah, I think the actual original price on this before the government rate was like 36 or 38, somewhere around there.
And that's why we can reduce our motor pool costs. If we turn them over every 2.5 years, we'll be able to reduce our motor pool costs to zero, basically close to even.
Sounds
Rather
good
than
to
having
me.
an outlay of cash every year. And that money goes right back into each department for a replacement. And whoever buys them, if we sell them at 2.5 years, we still have a 6-month warranty. So if you're buying a vehicle as a used vehicle, you've still got 6 months of a transferable warranty. That's a good cushion, so you're willing to pay retail. Just makes sense.
Julie?
I have a question, Mr. Faude. As we saw with the juvenile department, they're doing a lot of yard maintenance and they're going to get money put into their budget to cover that. I know down at your facility, there's some maintenance required. Would it make sense to put $500 into your budget as well so you can pay for maintenance?
Yeah, that, or maybe we could take less out for internet, because they paid me for internet access in the building. Whatever works best for them.
If you go down to Mr. Vaude's building, you'll notice it's in some rough shape, needs some landscaping, some overall maintenance.
It's withered.
It's
The
withered.
inside is great, but the outside is starting to get patina.
But I think we need to figure out some way of making sure that we can maintain that building, especially since if we say we honor veterans and that's our veterans hub where they're supposed to go, it would be nice to have that be a more welcoming facility.
Couple questions, Tony. Kind of off topic. How many veterans do we have in the county that you know of?
So I just made a call about this the other day. There is 2,900 and change that are registered through census. The clinic is currently using, or is seeing 1,600 patients. The number that I knew that was in the past was 5,300, and that was from 4 years ago in that clinic. So right now it's down to 1,600. But the census says we have 2,900 and change. And when I started 5 years ago, the census said, I believe it was 3,200.
How many are, or do you know the average age of a veteran?
Vietnam area is the largest.
So in the mid-60s is probably?
I think it was somewhere in the 67 percentile in Vietnam area.
This budget is required to maintain the amount that the county contributes, which is that bottom line, that 49,774. The state requires us not to supplement or do something that makes it less county support towards this fund, so we can go more, but we can't reduce our efforts in providing for our Veterans Department.
So we could add 500 in there for lawn care?
We could, but I think that that's a revenue thing, so it doesn't, I think if you get the revenue, it just helps that department. So I don't know if I'd want to change the proposed approved budget for a revenue.
Like I said, I don't know if it'd be easier just to
Or
get less for
expenditure.
internet, for them to get less for internet than, you know.
I think he's proposing not to change his budget, but he can absorb the cost within this
Because
this
they pay
budget.
$1,500 a year for access to the internet that I put in the building. Full wireless and the hardware.
I just know that VSO should be paid to take care of clients and not mow the grass.
you have a question?
Yes, as a Vietnam veteran, I'd like to thank you.
Thank you for your service.
I heard really good things about you through the other vets in the county. Are you responsible, or who writes the grants for your money, for your program?
This is through Oregon Department of Veteran Affairs.
Because I've recently read some articles about it, grants that are coming from the state for housing in Clam Falls.
Right.
Coos Bay took a building, so I was just
Through
wondering.
Operation Rebuild Hope, is that what you're talking about?
The one in Coos Bay or the one in Clam Falls?
Coos Bay, that's Operation Rebuild Hope.
Right, and the one Clam Falls, they got a grant for $1,165,000 to.
Correct.
I was just wondering, how does the process start? Do you
So-
start it, or do we get it started, or?
So in my office is actually unique. It's not just Veteran Services. So I'm the main one there, but there's also ORCA, Oregon Coast Community Action. They have something called Supportive Services for Veteran Families. And then next to them is HUD-VASH. So the HUD-VASH department is usually the person that goes after those kind of things. And then we kind of with them in regards to Veteran Services and Oregon Department of Veteran Affairs. But usually housing has to do with HUD-VASH or SIVF.
Are there anything in the works that you know of?
We've been trying for 5 years, but it's not something that's easy. You might be able to get the money, like we just passed up on a $13 million grant that we could have applied for employment stuff. The problem is if you don't have housing, there's no use in getting somebody a job if you can't get them housed.
Right.
So we got to get those pieces first.
I'm sorry. The last legislature passed, I don't know, a huge bill for housing from the state for grants.
Correct.
And I believe the one in Clam Falls
Correct.
came from the state. So I'm just kind of researching this a little bit. But
At NACO a few months ago, Carson came out and said that the federal government had just approved $66 million for rural counties, strictly for veterans. So I'm wondering how hard is, off topic, but we are a little ahead, how hard is it right now to seek veterans housing grants? Because we may have someone in the county that's going to donate a large piece of land to build veterans housing on.
That would be a conversation I would want all three of the partners in my office involved in, because that's what we've been trying to do. Is we've had opportunities before when I first started where there was money but there wasn't a location. Then there was a location and it wasn't something that necessarily people would approve of. Plus it was, it was off the beaten path. So just because we have it, we also have to get services to them.
I think this location is an absolute perfect location. It's got all the services you'd require, including transportation for veteran housing, and we're looking at probably 30 to 50 units.
That would be awesome.
So it's a huge thing that we may be able to get done here in the next. This man wants to move pretty quickly, so you might want to get ready.
Any final questions for Mr. Bowdy? Thank you for your service and support of our veterans, sir.
Thank you for yours.
Thanks,
too.
Tony. We'll talk soon.
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you. You guys have a great day.
Thank you.
Treasurer,
The treasurer's been moved to Tuesday at 10.
okay. Well, what I would recommend we do is let's take our 15-minute break a bit early, and maybe somebody can get on the phone to Sheriff Ward and ask him to come over a bit early, and we'll just keep mushing away. Currently, the time is 1:47. Can we all go with 2 o'clock? 13 minutes. All right. Meeting's adjourned till 2.
The council has offered to his scheduled for tomorrow afternoon, or we could do this one. He volunteered to do
We are live.
Okay, well, President, TV's on. We'll call this Curry County Budget Committee meeting back in session. And we are working to fill the schedule until the sheriff gets here. And so, Louise, did you have some specifics?
Well, council has volunteered to go over his budget.
All right.
Perfect. So he was scheduled for 2:40.
He's scheduled for tomorrow at 2:15, but we'll just move him here.
What page?
This is going to be tab 24. This should be, I think it might be the very first.
Page 148.
148. No.
So if we're ahead, do you think maybe
Looks
we
like
could...
it's
page-
156,
156 and 57.
156 and 157.
You need 2 pages, huh?
Yes.
Wow.
We have a lot of transfer services in our resources. We get our resources from a lot of different places. So really, county council, primarily a general fund account. If you look on page 149, that's the summary of the entire admin services page. It'll say that county council is a .886 FTE, that's me, and then a legal assistant 1 FTE. The other .14 of my FTE that doesn't come out of the general fund, I think comes out of the franchise for solid waste franchise.
Yes, solid waste, but that is in the general fund.
Okay, thank you. So, as you can see, there's really no changes in the budget. I've been the county council since 2016. Am I not on? Okay.
Now we're on.
Myself and Brenda Starbird are the staff. We have a contract for legal services for overflow for an assistant county counsel. There's really very few changes, so our budget went up by roughly $16,000, which I think mostly would be the salary roll-ups and things like that. So it's mainly a status quo. I thought I had a few more items in here as far as a report. Just recently, this year, well, since being here in 2015-16, we helped with the Flores Lake situation, where we were in court and administrative proceedings against the Department of State Lands and the Army Corps of Engineers. And the court proceedings weren't totally successful, but we did obtain a settlement through those court proceedings that helped the neighbors preserve their water. In the winter of the 2016-17, the citizens had approached the commissioners. This was one of the first nuisance cleanups that the county did, and I think it helped pave the way for the successful nuisance abatement and code enforcement program we have. We went ahead and we had to actually go to court on that case on behalf of the county to get an order to tear the property down. What happens is once we got that order, then the landowner themselves tore the property down, and after the nuisance house was gone, the property sold, and so that was a big improvement. And then most recently, we're appearing in front of the Court of Appeals of Oregon on behalf of the county, and this is a leftover from the winter of 2017 and 2018, about a year ago, when Weyerhaeuser came and approached the county to be annexed into a livestock district out in the middle of open range. And what that would have done would have required the cattle ranchers who've been ranching on that land for over 100 years to keep their property, fence their cattle out of Weyerhaeuser's land or face trespass charges. The board, after realizing that, asked us to try to get it reversed. We got it reversed in circuit court, and now we're at the Court of Appeals on that. So since 2016, we've prevailed at the circuit court, the Land Use Board of Appeals, the Oregon Tax Court. That was a case where the city of Brookings questioned our assessment of a golf course. And we've prevailed at the Bureau of Labor and Industries. We're currently defending the Roads Department against a claim of wrongdoing made by the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. I think our budget's reasonable and would just request approval. If there's any questions.
I have no questions. Any questions from anyone else?
Professional legal services on here, Mr. Huddle.
Yes, sir. Which line are you looking at, please?
Line 2 on page 157.
157, line 2. Yes, that is our outside county counsel, assistant county counsel, Shayla McKenzie Kudlak.
Okay. That's right.
So she's on essentially a $2,000 a month to handle anything I can't handle, and I think she does a really good job and is a really good value.
I've got a general question for you. In the event that there's some type of significant litigation, example would be an officer-involved shooting, wrongful death case against the county, is that I take it that would probably be contracted out?
Thank you. Yes. So we have insurance, and then the insurance hires the lawyers for that. My office essentially liaises on those between the outside counsel and our staff here, whether it's like you said, an officer case. Another recent one is a parks matter where there was a fire started in our parks by some users, and that's anyway. So yes, we have an insurance. They come in and they contract with the legal counsel, and we just again try to assist. But there are cases that are not insurance, like the livestock case or these land use cases, sometimes contractual cases, where I'll do the legal work in the courts and things like that.
Would that insurance cover litigation on asset forfeiture in case the county went that way?
So I think the answer there is no in the first instance. So here's how that could work. Asset forfeiture is when we are telling someone we're taking away your property because you did something wrong, and we have this legal justification for doing that. I would likely handle that in the first instance. But if there was then a claim that we didn't follow the procedure or violated someone's constitutional rights to due process before taking the property, that type of a claim would then be turned over to the insurance company. So on the front end, I would be involved. If someone alleged that we did something wrong, including myself, that would go to insurance.
Would you be involved in any of the asset forfeiture opinions? Let's say the county grabs a car with $100,000 cash in it, drugs, and the fine's $25,000. This is hypothetical.
Sure.
And we seize whatever they had, and they come back and say, well, the fine is less than the money you're taking. Who would you be involved in that representation, or would that go?
I could be if need be. You would also have the district attorney involved because there's a criminal matter associated. And again, it could go a couple of ways. But yes, if asset forfeiture cases, I came from a background at a municipality, and I handled some asset forfeiture cases for the police department there. It's a little bit interesting. The district attorney is not necessarily the legal counsel for the sheriff department. He is the prosecutor on behalf of the state, and the sheriff department actors are most often his witnesses. But if there's an actual event where the sheriff department is involved, such as a recipient of forfeiture, they may have me involved. And that would be something worked out between me and the district attorney and the sheriff department.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions for John? Hearing none, I'd like to move along to the sheriff. Sheriff Ward, thank you for coming over earlier. Appreciate that.
What page?
Good morning, Budget Committee, Commissioners. Any questions? We're done.
45, I believe.
Okay, thank you.
Louise, we did some changes on our budget, so if you go to the version 5, which was adopted today, or not adopted, but changed today, and it was all in the patrol section. There was the 2 positions we asked for weren't there. They were just said open positions and new, so we had to add those 2 positions in there.
So, I'm sorry, what do you mean by that?
On
Where are
patrol.
we at on that?
This current budget we're in right now, we have 12 budgeted patrol deputies. This only shows that we have 10 with 2 open positions, the ones that presented. So we added the 2 more positions in there.
Are we on page 45?
No, he's talking about the worksheet.
Oh, FTEs?
Worksheet.
The budget worksheet, you guys don't have it, I have it.
Oh.
So he's telling me to look at.
I'm looking
what
at
we
page
have.
44 of the budget, and I'm seeing 6 road deputy 1, 3 road deputy 2, and 3 road deputy 3, for a total of 12.
Well, that's what we have now, 12 road deputies. I want 2 more positions in this next year for road. which out of those two positions, one will be a detective, one will be a sergeant, but we would have still maintain 12 road deputies.
So the 12 gives you 24/7 coverage?
It gives us about 20 hours.
Okay.
Like I said, if we get up to 16 road deputies, I would have 24 coverage, no problem.
So the budget that was turned in for the proposed budget, you said something wasn't adding in, right? Or it wasn't
Yeah,
enough?
we had asked for, but it wasn't put in here. I went over and talked to Julie a little while ago, and we fixed it because with right now where it showed we had 12 positions, 2 of them weren't filled, which they were added, and those are claimed as new, but no, those were ones that were just unfilled. And so I filled one of them already, and we have 1 to go, but that gives us our 12 road deputies. We wanted 2 more positions. That was out of that 5 positions, 1 road records management, 2 corrections, 2 patrol. And those 2 weren't added in.
So when you're saying road deputies, you're saying road deputies 1, 2, and 3.
Yes.
So in this one that you corrected with Julie, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 road deputy 3s.
4, yes.
And 3 road deputy 2s.
Right.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 road deputy 1.
Right. Total of 12.
That's 13.
No, that's 13.
Well, that's, one of them will be, that's what that upper sergeant position for. Out of those positions, we were gonna make one of them sergeant. So we have a
there's-
sergeant on both sides of the week.
There's 2 sergeant positions here.
Well, when it says 2 sergeant, if you look at it, one Sergeant Ted Heath, he's only 43%, but he's mostly, he helps a little bit out of corrections, but he's also search and rescue, marine, and forest.
Okay, so if you, because I have that one plus an open position, so you're saying there's going to be 2 full open positions on Sergeant 2?
One of them was moved to a lieutenant position.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to count everybody here.
Yeah.
So I have Lieutenant Ensley,
Mm-hmm.
and there's going to be another lieutenant?
No.
Okay, so there's Sergeant 2 Heath,
Yeah, but
Sergeant Heath?
he's not a full-time
No.
corrections.
but in here there's
Yes.
.43, and then there's a full position that says open position.
Which wasn't budgeted in, and we fixed that.
That's one of the ones you added,
Yes.
and you're taking one of these road deputies up there? Because you got 13 road deputies now.
Right. One of
And-
them was going to be a sergeant. So
Okay.
that's why we've recreated that.
Okay, I'm still not getting the correct count. So if you're saying 12 deputies and then that 1 sergeant open position up there, then I've got 1 too many budgeted deputies down here. So yeah, okay, so he's got these 2. He said this one and this one is a sergeant's.
Right, but on this open one, until they fixed it, you had 0% in there. There was no money in it.
Okay, but now he's saying that this open position is going to be coming from one of these guys.
From one of these guys, it
And
will leave
which
12.
which will leave 12. But see, now I've got 12 plus another open position. So I think that there's 1 too many positions
Sheriff
in
Ward.
this. You see?
Yes,
There's not.
Can I just give you this and you can maybe tell us where the additions are? That way we're all on the same sheet of music because you guys are looking at something we don't have.
2 deputies, or two detectives, and 12 deputies. If you added the 2 positions, that's what it would have been.
Well, what I can tell you right now is we have
Let's see, there's
12 road
13 here.
deputies, 1 sergeant, and 1 detective in this budget season. What I want to add is just 2 more positions.
Okay,
Add
that's where it
2,
is.
and out of those 2, 1 will be a sergeant, 1 will be a detective.
So you'd have 2 detectives then?
Have 2 detectives.
And how many sergeants would you have at that point?
We would
Looks
have,
like one and a half.
2.43 plus 1 is 3.43?
It looks
but
like,
we actually have 2 sergeants plus a sergeant that's .43, 2.43 sergeants. And then the lieutenant would be, sergeant who is sergeant now would move to the lieutenant position.
I think the hard part is you have so many divisions we're trying to sort out. At least mentally, I'm just trying to sort out what the total amount is.
Well, what I can say right now is, like I said, 12 deputies we have. I want to add 2 positions to it. We have 14 deputies. Out of those 14 deputies, 1 will be a sergeant, 1 will be a detective.
but they're still called road deputies?
Right now,
Okay.
They're basically 2 deputies are getting promoted, 1 to detective and 1 to sergeant.
Okay, but you were telling us you had 14, but I'm only counting 13 here.
there should be 14.
Okay, so do we put it under road deputy 1, 2, or 3? Because right now you have 6 as road deputy 1, 3 as road deputy 2, and 4. So 4, 6, and 3 adds up to 13.
It should be 6 road deputy 1 positions with the 2 that we added. 3 road deputy 3s, or 2s, and 1, 2, 3, 4 road deputy 3s.
But that still adds up to
And
13.
then you've got a sergeant as well.
And then the sergeant, it would be 2.43?
Yes.
And then the detective, there's 1 there.
Well, we got 1 detective. One of the deputies is going to be working out of classification as a detective, but she's still going to be a deputy.
So right now, you're really staying with 1 detective in the budget.
Yes.
So the budget would be 2.43, 4, 3, and 6. Yeah, I think so. I
That's
mean,
15.43.
yeah. So what the corrected one that you and Julie did this morning, it's budgeting for a road deputy 1 open position, not a sergeant position. So there's 7 road deputy 1s and 1.43 in this one that you corrected. So the difference in pay, I don't know what that would be.
Well, we're budgeting for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 road deputy 1s. What's that say on theirs?
Says 6 1s,
Okay.
3 2s, 3 3s.
And then 2.43 on the sergeants,
Sergeants.
right?
And there's 1 detective, so if you're going to add a detective, I assume that just
Well,
goes
I'm not
with-
going to add a detective. Out of the deputy positions, I'm going to work 1 of them through the year as out of classification. Still be a deputy, but pay him 5% extra. We budgeted in for that
Yeah,
already.
that's already budgeted.
And that's going to be a 1, 2, or a 3, that detective.
It'll be a 2 probably.
So perhaps what we could do is, would it be possible tomorrow to have a revised number? I think we can still go through everything with the sheriff, but I'd like to see all this
We had to
data hit the-
revise that number there on that one because this one wasn't correct. We just found out this morning.
So let's process through your stuff and then we'll get it changed. Is tomorrow too
We
soon,
can-
Louise?
I am not sure. I think I have some open time tomorrow. In the morning we have that open space that Treasurer is taking, then we have Parks and Surveyor, and then another open. So we might be done a little earlier than that, even that next open one, because they're pretty small budgets for those 3. So we might have time before break tomorrow to address it, but I'd like to get it straight exactly how much, if we're going to change this proposed budget for the approval, exactly how much money we're talking about, because I think if we're going to add another $200,000, then we'll be revising that through road fund funding.
What I'd like to recommend is have you guys work on that, and Sheriff, would you be available tomorrow to go back over that for a few minutes if you need to come back in? Okay.
So if we do it first thing in the morning when Julie gets there at 8:30, then we could probably have some numbers by the time the budget committee meeting starts.
Yeah, all it is just update the file, paperwork.
And you're referring to page 44, that's what we're going to
Actually,
revise,
I'm
right?
referring, and the numbers that correspond with that. Obviously, the budget numbers are going to go up at that point, but
Yeah, so
I still
what it
think
would
it's-
change is it would change the total personnel services, and then it would change line 10, which is the transfer in from the road fund, improvement fund.
So, just so you know, the budget we offered wasn't the budget that I actually first presented because some positions were taken out, put them back in, but I'm not sure how, and I looked at it this morning and go, wait a minute, there's something wrong with that patrol because it's not what I asked for.
Well, we certainly want to give you and Louise time to get all that right, and that's good. And then I think you can still go through all your processes, but we'll button that part of it up tomorrow. Okay.
Yeah, so that's the only,
Where's Court at?
Not
here.
he was on the phone, but he had to go to a meeting.
Okay, this is basically a snapshot of my budget presentation. So it's going to take a few minutes to read through it. I just want to give you guys some information. This is a summary for a proposal for our budget for the 2019-2020. The Curry County Sheriff's Office is the chief law enforcement officer of the county and responsible for providing public safety for all county residents. We patrol 1,627 square miles, including several major waterways, countless back roads, and we have just over 22,000 citizens living within the borders between California and Coos County. There are 3 unincorporated cities in Curry County, Port Orford, Gold Beach, and Brookings, and we provide law enforcement assistance to each of the 3 city police departments. Even with the cities having their own police force, we still have the jurisdiction responsibilities throughout the entire county. We have several smaller communities to include Agnes, Langlois, Harbor, Tusk River, Nasika Beach, and Ophir. Curry County is also known for the tourism, with thousands of people visiting and recreating each year. The Sheriff's Office currently has 8 divisions to include the jail, civil, search and rescue, parole and probation, patrol, marine patrol, forest patrol, and 911 dispatch. The sheriff has mandated services that we have to be accounted for. Dispatch and communications. Currently we have 8 communications 911 deputies to cover 24/7. One of which is cross-trained in civil process to assist as chief civil deputy for the county. Communications deputies are responsible for handling all regular 911 calls, dispatching first responders, data collection, warrant entries, restraining order entries, records keeping, monitoring custody and control over the jail, providing LEDs and NCIC information to deputies and officers on traffic stops, coordinating with other agencies, providing criminal history and dispersing criminal reports to the district attorney, and emergency medical dispatching, to name a few. We dispatch for police, fire, and ambulance service, as well as notifying other city and county services when issues arise. This current year, we added a much-needed supervisor for telecommunications to help manage employees and limit our liability exposures. The jail. Currently, we have 13 corrections deputies with two corporals and 1 sergeant jail commander to cover 24/7. We have experienced a high turnover, and we are constantly doing recruitment and hiring process. The jail is the hub of the Curry County Public Safety. It's like a mini city in itself. We house, we feed, we clothe, provide medical services, and provide counseling and mental health services. We transport prisoners to and from our facility on a weekly basis to other counties and to also the Portland area for required court-ordered mental health evaluations. We get people who have just been arrested and at their worst. We have to deal with aggressive, abusive, and non-abnormal behaviors due to intoxication and or substance abuse until they are stabilized and beyond while they are incarcerated. We transport in custody subjects to court on a daily basis, and we have to prepare inmates for court appearances, making sure they have what they need for their defense. There are strict Oregon jail standards and minimum staffing levels. We are in a constant state of training to manage our liability. Currently, for civil, we have one civil deputy who handles the entire civil process for the county, including subpoenas, writs of assistance, foreclosures, summons, juvenile petitions, citations, small claims, restraining orders, stalking orders, warrants, evictions, sheriff's property sales, and concealed handgun license applications and renewals. The onslaught of concealed handgun and license and applications and renewals are alone to keep the chief civil deputy extremely busy. The civil department carries one of the highest liabilities due to the nature of the civil process, so this is in a constant state of management. Patrol. The 2016-17 budget, we had 10 road positions, of which we ended up with 9 hired before losing several to other agencies due to low pay and job security. The 2017-18 budget, we were budgeted for 8 positions. This current year, 2018-2019 budget, we are budgeted 12 positions, and we have 11 road deputies hired at this time. Up until last year, we were only able to cover 10 hours a day, 4 days a week with patrol, with 2 to 3 deputies on at a time. Our deputies have to have backup with the amount of violent crimes that we deal with on a daily basis. We are only able to handle numerous priority calls, plus mandated to serve hundreds of civil papers. Our deputies are always subject to call back after long hours of working. We have one detective that handles most of the major crime reports, search warrants, missing endangered people, major drug cases, sex abuse, and follow-up to patrol deputy cases. The detective works with the other agencies on cases that bleed over from the city, county, and state lines. We have one patrol sergeant who is responsible for the direct supervision of patrol, who handles his own caseload as well as reviews crime reports and assigns cases and follow-ups. The sergeant is also responsible for work plans, after-hour call-outs, training schedules, patrol deputy evaluations. The sergeant is also in charge of the reserve program, which supplements the patrol division by providing security on major events. The sergeant is also a range master who provides mandatory training for all the divisions. We provide deputies with all required training, all the necessary protective equipment, including duty gear, weapons, less lethal, body cameras, equipment, patrol vehicles, and uniforms. We had to provide constant training to keep up with the mandatory certification required by DPSST in all divisions. What we had was not adequate to provide public safety to our citizens that they deserve. Today, with what resources we have, we cover about 18 hours a day, 24/7, and remain extremely busy playing catch-up. The Curry County Sheriff's Office is a member and plays a major role in the county's major crime team. We coordinate with District Attorney and several other law enforcement agencies, including Oregon State Police, the Brookings Police, Gold Beach Police, Port Orford Police Departments, in high-profile cases, of which we had several instances where a major crime team was called. Forest Patrol. We have one forest deputy paid through private timber companies and U.S. Forest Service. The deputy is responsible for patrolling private and U.S. Forest Service property, checking for all fire dangers, unlawful trespassing, hunting, camping, dumping, or removal of forest products. The deputy checks the hundreds of gates for damages, investigates and takes enforcement action when necessary, and is a visual deterrent. The fourth deputies also assist patrol deputies and other law enforcement agencies with high priority calls in their criminal investigations. Marine Patrol. Currently we have one Marine deputy, one Marine sergeant, who also is a SAR coordinator and supervises Marine Force and assists with patrol functions. They are responsible for all waterways in the county, as well as the first 3 miles out in the ocean. The Rogue River is one of the busiest waterways in the state, with thousands of visitors recreating both in motorized and non-motorized vehicle vessels. They do boating checks, school education, enforcement, rescues, and recoveries. They are also instructors for the Oregon State Marine Board and teach around the state. With continued funding cuts from the Oregon State Marine Board, they only fund about 1.25 FTEs, leaving the county to have to supplement the portion of the Marine program. This is a vital program to our community that needs at least 2 full-time FTEs. SAR. We have one SAR coordinator who is responsible for coordinating all search and rescue missions. The SAR coordinator is also the Marine Sergeant who manages approximately 50 volunteers that are required to meet SAR standards and certifications. This calls for constant training, setting up monthly meetings, monthly trainings and on required topics, outfitting volunteers with necessary equipment and clothing. The SAR coordinator is responsible for maintaining the SAR vehicles and outfitting with proper safety gear for rescues and recoveries. The SAR coordinator works with 9 different counties within CORSAR, providing resources or accepting resources when necessary. The SAR coordinator tracks volunteer training hours, makes reports to OEM on every SAR issue. We have a sheriff's substation in Harbor that is utilized for the South County business, a patrol office, and a probation office. This office is beneficial for the South County residents without having to travel to Gold Beach to do civil business, apply for CHLs or renewals, or report crimes. The only funds that support this through the next year would come from parole and probation. The office will only be used for parole and probation and the office for patrol to do reports. Parole and probation. Currently we have 4 parole and probation deputies, which includes the sergeant, who is a P&P director that deal with all offenders ranging from high risk offenders to low risk offenders within the county. These P&P deputies each manage a very high caseload during compliance checks, doing compliance checks, daily one-on-one scheduled meetings and home visits. The P&P deputies take calls at all hours of the day and night, not from only our deputies, but from other county agencies in and out of the area. The P&P division has done a remarkable job in managing the funds provided by the state and also their efforts to reduce recidivism. When we have a major event such as what we did the past 2 years in the Checo bar fire and the Klondike fire, it's all hands on deck. The sheriff's responsible for evacuation notices, the evacuations, enforce closed areas, and then assist in getting people back into their property. During those events, we evacuated over 4,000 people at one time or another, and if the fires had encroached a few more miles, the Agnes community and the entire city of Brookings and community of Harbor would have possibly had to been evacuated. We have a contract with the U.S. Forest Service that allows us to be reimbursed for all of our expenses, and after the fires, we were able to request and did receive in a short time the expenses we incurred. Overall, with our new hires for patrol this year, we still have limited resources, but we play a critical role in providing for our community's public safety needs. We do this by collaborating with other law enforcement agencies and public service organizations to properly address both public safety needs and community concerns. For example, we have been involved in a number of high-profile cases where lives have been saved, and we have nationally and locally recognized deputies. We have deputies that have been recognized by OSSA and DPSST for their outstanding efforts in their field. We also provide valuable resources for other agencies during the critical incidents and remain committed working with the community support organizations to work on solutions from increasing concerns regarding mental health, veterans assistance, and the best allocations of resources to address our community needs. We also are involved with other local agencies in a community service program where the courts can sentence low-level offenders to perform community service in lieu of jail time. At the same time, we continue to evaluate our daily operations, looking for ways to become more efficient and progressive in how we provide our public service safety. Remaining mindful that we must be well-rounded and capable of addressing the county's public safety needs. That said, our staff provide a quality service and do so with limited resources and/or assistance. They are dedicated to the community needs and to our mission. The mission for members of the Curry County Sheriff's Office to constantly promote and provide a feeling of safety and security to our citizens. Our vision for the Curry County Sheriff's Office is to provide professional law enforcement services which delivers a feeling of safety and security to all citizens in an unbiased and fiscally responsible manner using the resources available. This year we are excited to announce that we have some very positive changes happening with the support of our commissioners. Just to name a few, the outdated and never-failing microwave system that we all rely on for all our communications is being replaced. This is going to be monumental when it comes to public safety and the safety of our first responders. The Commissioner's support of labor's negotiations, which give pay parity to our deputies, make it a more attractive place to live and work and stay. The Commissioner's support of a K-9 program for our office, I can't begin to tell you what the difference this is going to make in our drug-related crimes. The Commissioner's support for increasing resources and finding funding for those resources to increase the number of deputies on the road to handle public safety concerns, making it possible to be more proactive than reactive. We have limped along with lack of resources for several years now, and we are asking for, besides a permanent funding solution, is continued support from the Commissioners to help us provide adequate public safety, and in doing so, to use whatever means funding available to do so. ORS 368706 gives the Commissioners the right to and the authority to, by law, to use road funds for patrol and indirect cost of patrol. It is now up to the 6 budget committee members to tell the citizens of our county that they care about their safety and are willing to do what it takes to provide it. And that's basically a snapshot of our organization, what we do, and what we're asking for. The proposed budget you have, which there has been a couple changes on it, you'll get those answers tomorrow when he fills that up. But at this point, you can answer any questions you like. Any questions?
Sure. Could
Yes.
you talk a little bit about the K-9 program and how that can actually bring revenue into the county?
Yeah, we talked about that in another budget presentation. Well, it's more of a BOC presentation, but when most of our drug-related problems and all the burglaries and the thefts and things like that are usually related to the drugs we have. So if we have a K-9 program that can get out and work on trying to, curb the problem with the drugs, we could probably, get rid of some of our problems with the burglaries and the thefts and what have you. But when a dog alerts on something, say for instance, we do a traffic stop and he alerts on a car, and we get a lot of cash, and we can do asset forfeitures on that cash or even the vehicle they're driving, that money can come back into the county, and it can help pay for the K-9 program itself, plus maybe some other issues with funding issues with a civil criminal.
If I can make a comment on that, on the proposed K-9 program, some of you weren't here when the proposal was presented to the Commissioners. I am a former K-9 handler, and I am also very familiar with the working aspects of how asset seizure works and how those dogs play an integral part in that. And just to give you an example, Ken, there's a K-9 team in Medford that they did $3.1 million in asset seizure last year.
Right.
So right now in our community, we don't have any type of narcotic interdiction program occurring. So from basically Humboldt County to Coos County, there's no package interdiction, there's no road interdiction, there's nothing like that taking place. And the detective that is currently assigned with the Sheriff's Office, he is focused on violent crimes and other types of crimes that are certainly a bigger priority, but there's no major narcotics investigations that are taking place in terms of buy walks and buy busts and those types of things. And by taking a narcotics detection dog and introducing that into the Sheriff's Office, it will have both an impact on drug traffickers that are currently going undetected, and will, in my opinion, most definitely bring in additional funding from the asset seizure part of it.
Thank you. Commissioner
I just think we need to be clear on the asset seizure. Not all of it comes back to the county.
No,
What
ma'am,
portion usually comes back?
Not all of it, and that'll be determined as the program goes on. But I know it's not uncommon for a dog to do a couple of $50,000 seizures at a UPS facility in a day. And, you know, we get a percentage of that, and that starts to add up over a couple months. That's pretty significant in and of itself.
So you don't have an actual percent that we get back?
It's going to depend on, I think, and council can probably answer this better than I can, but it's going to depend on what we work out with the district attorney's office, and then what the parameters of the actual seizure are, whether it's federal, whether it's local, that type of thing.
Oh, okay.
It's a statutory formula. It's quite significant, though.
Okay. Anything's fine. I have a couple of other questions.
Please.
Okay, I notice on line 3, which is fees, civil charges, it went from 50,000 down to, and this is in the revenue section, it went from 50 to 25. Is there a reason it went back by half?
Well, it's not all in at this point.
Well, this is for the budget. Budget last year, it was 50,000. This year's budget is 25,000. Just curious.
It's on the civil charges.
That's line 3.
If I can help with that, we looked at, if you look at the historical data, when we budgeted, we were actually trying to be very realistic, because if you put revenue in that you're just guessing at and you know you're not going to get, then it artificially inflates the revenue into general fund and into the balance. So we didn't want to do that. So if you look at the history, that's why we reduced it, because history shows that it's not $50,000.
Okay, so I see a $44,000 here, and is that actual? That's 17. And 18 was 34.
Yes, but the 10-year average is 38, and that's a 10-year average. But if you look at years around that one that was 44, that was a pretty high one.
Would anyone happen to know what the year-to-date is currently on the current fiscal year?
I can look at the March.
I don't have the financials for March with me.
Because if there's a big change, we'll see it in this current year.
It's going to be around 16 or 17,000 year to date.
That's a big change.
Yeah.
We'll let Louise be the fact checker.
I gotta get down to the sheriff's one. Page 21.
Oops. And that was a little one. I've got a big one in just a second here.
As of March, it's 22,000.
So we might want to push that closer to 30 then. I wouldn't get too carried away into the 50s, probably not a good idea, but I would recommend that you take a look at that at 30 if your year-to-date is at that number.
Yeah, we budgeted for 50, and we're not going to get 50.
Okay, then one other question on line 10. This is transfer from the road patrol. Last year it was 481,000. This year it's $1,037,416. So that's a difference of 556,156. That's all coming from the road fund?
Yes.
Okay, and that's for extra deputies?
That's for the 4 extra positions
Okay.
and equipment and everything that goes along with that.
Okay.
We didn't use the 481,000 last year either, so.
Okay, so it's like you can't find the people, is that what happened?
Yeah, it's hard to recruit, and we had 12 positions, like I said. We're just now hired, and we're in the 2 months left of the budget season, and we just hired the 11th person. And so it's a struggle trying to find people we need for patrol.
Okay.
And Ms. Oldham, we did not actually, that number was provided to us, that balances from what's available in general fund and what's allowable to be charged to the road reserve. So I think, I wasn't part of the budget last year, but I think that last year there was a little more conservative use of the road fund. We didn't want to use quite as much, and so.
Well, the previous year, I don't believe we used any of it.
No.
The previous year, 2017, 18, the general fund did not transfer any money from
The road fund, yeah.
And then in 18, 19, this current year, the 481 was 3 deputies and their vehicles and equipment.
I think it was 4 deputies.
I think it was 3.
Well, you didn't use it anyway, so.
But we didn't hire all.
But you got all the vehicles, right?
Yes.
You got the vehicles, but not the guys.
Right.
So you've got all these big, beautiful vehicles.
No,
and-
they're all used. We
Only one guy down.
Oh, okay. Okay.
The accounting side of this, so when the money, let's say $1 million is budgeted from the road department to support road deputies, do you transfer $1 million over to general fund, or are you doing it, and taking the money out as you're using it each month? What's the methodology there?
Actually, what we do is if you look at page 46, the next page there, on line 30, the contribution that the general fund makes to the sheriff's department in this budget is $1,295,000.27. So, what I do is, once I've closed the books, I will go to the sheriff's department, and I will look at the number that's there. And if that number is sitting at $1,495,000, I'm only going to take $200,000 of road fund money. So I'm only going to take as much as I have to make the general fund whole. I'm not going to take any more revenue from the road fund than that.
Okay.
So it just depends on how many people get hired, when they get hired, how he retains the employees. A good portion of this budget is employees. So I only take as much as to that is actually needed. I don't take any more.
For example, we have
If I did more than that, I'd actually be funding the general fund with road department money. And that's not something we want to do.
So we had $481,000 allotted. If we would have had everybody lined up and hired them right on the spot,
July 1st.
have all their equipment and everything, then we would have used $481,000. But through the year, it takes time, and we're not spending that money, so we won't know what it's going to be till the end of the year. And they drawn out, taken from at the end of the year.
Yeah, it's a closing journal entry for the closing the year of how much I take.
Commissioner Pash?
Well, so in other words, even what you're saying here with the one, with hiring the new deputies that you're scheduled to hire, if we approve this budget, that $1 million is probably going to be significantly reduced because you've still got to find the deputies and all their equipment. So that's not an accurate number. Probably it's more of
It's if you did everything on July 1st.
pie in the sky number. It's a pie in the sky.
That's how much you would need, but it's to balance the budget, you have to assume that you're going to
No, I
do it on
understand.
July 1st. But it
I'm
doesn't
just trying to
happen.
make it make sense for, people that are going to see this video or read about it or whatever.
Right.
One more question, Sheriff. If you had a perfect world, where hoping this budget committee is going to be together for a few years, what would be the requirements for 24-hour service in this county and the standard or level that you'd like to see?
I would need 16 road deputies to feel comfortable with going 24/7. That way, every deputy would have enough backup out there to support themselves and to handle all the amount of calls that are coming in, and to try to get rid of some of the problems that we've had. The reason, we're in the situation we are in today with the county as far as drugs and everything is because we don't have the resources to put towards it. And just like I mentioned the other day when we did that sex offender sweep, can you imagine, with what we got accomplished with that many officers? And even if we, when we had Go Kill come down with a drug dog, and within a couple hours, start taking drugs off the street, if we had the resources, we can make one heck of a difference in this community, and be a lot more safer, a lot more enjoyable to come. A lot more people would, wouldn't be afraid to come here and recreate and stay and spend their money. And
So in follow-up for the K-9 unit, those 2 deputies would be 2 deputies that you've already hired in, or would those be 2 new
no,
hires?
those are the deputies already hired. It's just another process in what they do. They're just like any other deputy. If I assign somebody to be working on assistant to detective, they're still a deputy.
Gotcha.
And we're not hiring anymore, so.
At the risk of offending dog lovers, look at it like the deputy is getting a new piece of equipment, and that's the K-9.
Absolutely. And one more question, if I could. Is there a possibility with 14 deputies, I mean, we all know the criminals know when nobody's at the border down there, that you could run some spot nights here and there, to cover that period?
Well, we do.
Maybe shake things up a little bit, let people down there know, hey, no, wait, they must be changing things because there's a deputy there now.
Well, we do that from time to time.
Okay.
And I can tell you last year, I'm not sure about him, but I came out in the middle of the night, like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, because we had a rash of car break-ins. I found the guy, just by patrolling. He ran from me, but I got him later. I identified who he was.
Okay.
And we cut that problem down.
Good. All right, thanks.
I have a couple of questions. When you're figuring your budget out and on the road funds, did you figure it just on direct costs as allowable in the statute?
Direct costs?
Yeah, I heard, in case you want to. There's direct and indirect costs on that?
Yeah.
So you figured just the direct, you didn't?
Well, there's a little bit of indirect costs there, and that's for the 2 deputies that I wanted to put in for corrections to help deal with court security. They are indirect, or they're more of a direct cost, but we'll call them indirect costs because the guys who we bring in that we arrest on the streets, our corrections deputy have to deal with it. So it takes money and time, their time, to do that. So if I want some more deputies, I gotta figure out they are a direct cost, if that makes sense.
And I guess what I'm trying to get at the bottom of that page, it says indirect costs can be facilities, yada, yada, yada. And did I understand that the elevator went up last year and
Yeah, but that's more of an occupancy issue.
Or?
That elevator thing was an occupancy issue. We pay for that through different funds.
Did it come out of your budget?
No.
Okay. All right.
That was a building repair.
Okay. So then the second part of this is probably...
Let me add one to that. We, not last year, but the year before that, we used, I think, $100,000 for dispatch, and they are a direct cost of patrol. But I don't think we used anything for that this year.
Not for dispatch.
Okay. That was answering. The second part really comes back to my earlier question on the road funds. And I asked for a balance, and you came up with a balance of $30,948,274, and we're going to receive $561,661.88 in interest. So if you take that, and maybe my calculations are off here, but if you take that away from the what he's asking this year, and that 561 will replace about half of that. So really you'd only have a decrease in that fund, in my mind, and maybe my accounting mind's not there, of the remaining $400,000 or $500,000. Am I making any sense?
The interest revenue does supplement what's being taken out, but the sheriff's department isn't the only department using the road improvement funds.
Okay.
It's also another $2 million, $3 million is being budgeted to be used by the road department itself.
Yeah, I think I meant more specifically
So
towards the sheriff's office when you're talking about a big increase in expenditure.
But it's
to me, in my
decreasing.
mind, we get part of that back in interest because the other road funds we have to use anyway. And if we have any major road repairs due to damage, then they just declare this a disaster area that makes us eligible for funds that could replace some of that in the future from the road side, not from the sheriff's side.
So in the road department, budgets to also use those road improvement funds to supplement their budget. However, just like the sheriff's department, only the amount that is actually needed is taken from the road department or from road improvement funds. So last year they budgeted like $2 million. I think it was Mr. Alcorn's question, where he said how much was being used for the road. So in 2017-18, we budgeted to take $2,800,000 for the road department, but we only took $393 because we did get SRS money that year, big surprise money. This year we're budgeted to take $2,337,000, but I think it's going to be a lot like last year, where we're only going to take $300,000 to $400,000, because also this year we got the SRS money, but it was a 2-year one-time thing. So when we're budgeting for next year for the $3,500,000, depending on, once again, how much staffing he has, how much he keeps, the projects that he does, he could use that $3,500,000 next year. And that's the one that really has been depleting the road improvement fund lately, because we have really only been using that for that or the sheriff's department. The sheriff's department didn't get anything the year before last. A small amount this current year that we're not even going to spend all of. So that's where the road improvement funds have been going.
Right. I guess in my mind, I still think it's a win-win situation.
Well,
we're getting
yes,
we're getting 561 back, and we're using $1 million of that to increase the safety of the citizens and the sheriffs. Then
the interest, though, is it hasn't been at that level. Like Commissioner Pash said earlier, there's been some significant increases. So like as of December of this year, all of our accrued interest this year was about just a little bit below what we got the entire year last year. So a half a year, we received almost the entire interest receipts that we had the prior year. So this year is a big year in interest. How long that lasts, I don't know.
I understand that, but I still think it goes back to what my belief was in the beginning, that, well, you know, the county wants to keep kicking the can down the road, and maybe we won't have it next year. You know, I think we need to use some of this money. And how many years would it take? I'm not advocating depleting that fund, but how many years would it take to get this county back on track to using funds? And if the interest rate, and I understand it fluctuates my own situation financially, but still, I think that we need to seriously look at funding the sheriff's office. We still have the issue of compression that he talked about for non-bargaining employees. You know, what's it going to take to bring these folks up to speed so every year we don't have to sit in here and try to get these folks enough money to make them competitive with the unions. My reasoning is probably off, and it's more if I was reading this article in the newspaper, then that's what I would probably say. We're getting the interest. The net cost is less than $1 million to start with. If we need road funds, it's a disaster county. It's, you know, one of 7 counties, I believe. FEMA funds are available. Yes, will they be available this year? Probably not. Nothing will come quick. It's going to have to be over a 3 or 5 year period. So with that said, I'll quit talking.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because the budget we propose, in order to fix that compression issue, we have to have the non-reps at a 9.8% because of what's going to happen with the union contracts.
They were very far behind to start with.
What's that?
I said the non-reps were behind before we even started with our negotiations. So.
And I did talk to Julie, and I got to talk to Julie a little bit later about how we fix that. We have a way to fix it. I mean, you talked about it's not really a budget issue, it's more or less a policy issue. But in order to fix that, I think we have a way to do that fairly easy, just to reclassify what the E15, E17s are, just put an L in front of the LE law enforcement, because we're a different breed. We have to have certifications to maintain our scale, pay scale, or whatever. And it's different. It should be different from the rest of the county that don't do law enforcement. So we figured we'd change the pay scale a little bit by just saying, say for instance, we'll take him. See, the captain's on an E15. Others that are management may be into the same E15, whatever, in the same pay scale. Yeah, if you change the, in order to get everybody, the 9.8, instead of doing everybody across the board, you change it just for the law enforcement side and have our own specific, it's only specific to law enforcement.
Yeah, so what he's talking about is since he's non-represented, if you do a compression just for the captain, you are really addressing non-represented for the whole county because of the pay scales other people are on the same pay scale as him, and you can't change his pay scale without changing everybody else's.
But you can change the classification.
But if you take that classification pay salary schedule and make that one separate from the E17 or whatever everybody else is on, and have a different E17 just for law enforcement, then he can take care of compressing just under that and not affect all of the non-represented in the whole county.
So I think that would be a policy thing that you would talk about, how we fix that.
Do other counties do the same thing? Just curious. Or do you even know?
That might be a question that for the county council to look into.
What other counties do?
Yeah.
Change their salary schedule. I don't know whether you...
I mean, I could be one person who could look into that, I suppose. It's kind of a payroll question, but anyhow,
well, after talking to Julie, I mean, she thought that would be a way to do it, and I was going to talk to Ms. Smeltzer and say, how do we get this done with our board, just to change the policy.
Yeah, if that's something the board wants to look into, I'll do
Well,
my part trying to figure it out.
I would think your job description would make that distinction okay to do. Just
well, I would think so too.
But right now, as a non-represented, he's not on a. I mean, there are several non-represented that are on the E17 salary schedule that.
Those are like the department heads, is what you're saying? Okay.
And so that if there's other department heads on there, you can't fix the compression issue for the captain without affecting other department heads.
Yeah, that makes sense, and what you're
so you
saying
just
makes a lot of
have
sense to me.
Change the E17 salary schedule so that there's basically two of them.
Just say
One's
LA17
the
or something.
sergeant, and then E17 for anybody else that's on E17.
Because that job description is significantly different.
So if that was the case and you guys were to agree to that, then we could put that 9.8 back in there, and the compression issue would be fixed.
And we can certainly do that as a budget item and take care of it in a board meeting to correct the salary schedules.
Or we could just revamp the whole payroll system. That's archaic.
That probably wouldn't be a bad idea.
Do you need this back?
No,
It's
I have some
the
copies.
most salary schedules I've ever seen in a...
So are there any other questions for the sheriff?
Not for me.
So when we come back tomorrow, let's just make it clear that we're just be talking about the number of personnel we're talking about, right?
We'll see some clarity in the number of personnel, and that will adjust your overall budget numbers. And so we'll get to see both of those outcomes. and I anticipate that you should probably schedule about 15 minutes for that.
Okay.
Don't know when it'll be, because it'll be based on when Louise has
Well,
time to get
I
to
think
the-
that, I mean, there is an open space at 10:45 tomorrow. I'm just thinking that it might even be a little bit more than that 15 minutes available if we need that. So,
45?
so if you come at like 10:30, in case we finish early on the other stuff, then,
And we just need to get together with you afterwards just to make sure that, or before, in the morning.
in the morning or depending, because basically the sheriff is all I have for this afternoon. If you want to adjourn early, then we can go work on that, or if you want to,
No, we're going to summarize, and then we'll
Do
probably
some more
end early today,
okay.
just so that maybe you guys have time to do that, and then we can work all that in
So
on a
if you
normal
want-
schedule.
If you want to see maybe 4 o'clock this afternoon?
4 o'clock's fine.
Okay.
I don't know how they're doing the changes, but I think we had talked about raising the, and even though it's not a lot of money,
Civil
but it's still
fees.
$5,000.
Yeah, I've got that.
At 30,000, just to make
I've got
sure.
that note here, and so what we don't change a proposed budget. What we do is the changes are going to hit this approved column, so I can tell you how much, and when we're finished with everything and ready to approve, we approve a dollar amount, and that dollar amount is what we basically are in the approved budget. So.
I just wanted to make sure we had those numbers, because
Yeah.
we kind of jumped topics real quick after that.
Yeah.
Quick discussion.
So I have that in the, and payroll changes.
And there'll be some other issues, you know, when it comes to some other the little budgets, and if you take for Marine Patrol, for instance, we
I mean,
really cut the
If we want to
heck out
go
of that.
through all of those other ones, I mean, we basically were just talking about civil, criminal, but if we want to go through the pages on the other ones, we do have time to do that.
Okay.
Do you have a question?
I hate to hold you on this, but on the 9.8, is that going to be something the commissioner's going to resolve on the pay scales to put that back in the budget for a later vote, or is that something, I'm not sure where you ended up on this.
I think that we're talking about the board authorizing a separate salary schedule, but putting it in for Captain to solve
lieutenant
his
position.
compression issue.
And is that going to be put in this budget time, or is that still just going to be under discussion?
Is what?
Is that
Are you going to add that in?
change?
We're
gonna
going
add
to
that
do
change in?
the payroll changes, which will include the compression issue with the captain, and we'll have that by tomorrow, the total cost of adding those things. And, but the actual salary schedule will go to the board after we're done with budget committee, because there's, the next board meeting is, what, next Wednesday?
And we don't need any more work to do.
You don't have to
We just
do
want to
that
do our
in
work.
Wait a minute.
So
I
I
have
just
lots
want
of
to, I want to
questions.
summarize real quick. The sheriff was here to go over the sheriff's budget in criminal civil, search and rescue, marine forest, jail communications, parole and probation, and K-9. So if anyone has any questions for the sheriff on any of those programs, now would be a good time.
You raised a question about the Marine, and I'd like to, if you would continue on that.
Well, not so much a question, more of a statement that when we were doing our budget for the Marine Patrol, we had a pretty significant cut this year from the Oregon State Marine Board. So we went through and we've got some of our line items blown out because of material and services, or repairs and things like that. But we've cut down based on the cuts we're looking at. We've cut that budget down to where it's really not feasible to operate like that.
Louise, what page is the Marine?
Marine Patrol
48.
is on page 106. It's tab 17.
Basically, we've cut our materials and services on the marine side down to where it's really not feasible to make it through the year on those numbers, just to try and make it fit, and I don't think we were all the way there yet.
We went from budgeting 44,400 for materials and services to Marine Patrol, down to 35,574. And that's with the changes in the general liability insurance increased and admin charges increased. So the total admin charges were increased and the general liability increased by $1,000. So they've lost over $10,000 really of materials and services to use for the program by cutting and by other costs increasing. We did budget to supplement this budget somewhat from the general fund this time, just to be able to balance at these low numbers. And the number that we're bringing from the general fund is a minimal 5,181. But
is your Marine deputy a full-time position?
We have one full-time Marine position, and we used to have 2 full-time Marine positions. Now it's down to 1.25.
1.25. Because I know some counties, like I think Malheur County got a reserve or a retired deputy to come back and fill in like summertime, but I know the coast is a lot different. I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, it's kind of dangerous to have one guy in a boat out there.
Yeah.
So many recreations.
But I mean, he brought what I'm getting at is that they used part of that a part-time position along with a full-time, so they would have 2. And if your Marine deputy goes out, does he go out? He goes out with another road deputy, right? No. By himself.
We can, if we have another road deputy available, to send him out with him. But for general patrol, he may be up on the river, milepost 26, all by himself, and something happened, well, he's by himself.
Do you have a reserve program of any type for the Marine?
No. We have reserves, but not for Marine. We do have a person that's funded through the Marine program for us, basically part-time. They threw in 10 grand at us, and that was to help the emphasis on the Checo River when they had a lot of boating traffic down there, and for education purposes and things like that. But that's basically, I think probably that money's spent up by now. It only lasts maybe 4 or 5 months.
If we know we're doing a rescue, we have a number of deputies that have dry suits, that are swimmers, that, they'll hop in the boat with the Marine deputy, but generally the Marine deputy is patrolling by himself. Unless Sergeant Keith has free time, then he'll hop in the boat sometimes, but, or if one of the guys just decides they want to do a ride-along and they have time to do it. So it's just like everywhere else in the Sheriff's Office. I mean, we do the best that we can. It's a program that, not only does the Sheriff's Office have to have it, the community has to have it.
I agree.
And whatever we transfer over there, we're getting a heck of a bang for our buck. Right now we're transferring...
Talk closer to that. When you took this way, you probably aren't being heard.
Right now we're transferring, looks like we're transferring $5,000, and for that we get a deputy and a quarter, 2 boats, 2 power boats, a drift boat, all the equipment and the training and the knowledge that goes with that. We have 2 of the most experienced Marine deputies in the state. They both instruct at the Marine Academy. They just both spent a week over there instructing. It's a program that's invaluable to this community. Our number 1 recreation in this county is the water, whether it's the Rogue River, the Chetco River, the ocean, whatever. The elk, the sixes, all of them, they all get recreated on. And it's a program that, like I said, is invaluable.
Yeah, it just seems awful low to not have more funds to get more deputies in a boat.
Yeah. The problem is statewide with the Marine Board, as boat registrations go down, the funding through the Marine Board goes down, and so they did across the state cuts to every program. They didn't pick any single program. They just said everybody across the state has to cut this percentage out of your budget, which I think it was a 10% or something like that cut that we, in reduction in funds, so.
Okay.
Yep.
And you may wonder where, I know I'm not trying to take too much time up here, you're probably wondering where I'm getting this 9.8% for the non-representative. Without saying too much about what the union got, there was a cost of living that was given to non-representatives this last year, I believe, and I talked to Julie about what it would take just to get the lieutenant position just above the sergeant. So I could promote to a lieutenant and not do a pay cut. And he says the minimum would be a 1.4% increase above what the salary it is. So that 1.4 is just the base above what the union's looking at.
Sheriff, I have 2 questions. So you and I have been working on a grant for Forest Patrol. Is one of those positions included in this list that you have presented to us? So that would be an additional person?
Additional. If, I don't really try to put too much stock in the grants until they're actually approved. And I don't want to budget for something that may or may not happen. So.
Okay, and then I have another question. Historically, it's my understanding you haven't received a designated part of the marijuana revenue that the county gets. Is that true?
That's true.
Now that you're starting up an actual K-9 unit and aggressively going after, I guess, drugs, to me it makes sense that that money should be dedicated to your department. It also shows that you're relying less on the road funds. I'm curious if that's something that has been discussed when you were creating your budget, or I guess question from legal whether or not we can do.
Yeah, I don't know, I don't like to count on anything that's not actually there. I do know that the law says that, as far as the marijuana state tax money, a portion of it has to go to law enforcement. Now, I don't know if that's just going into general fund and then coming towards us, but is that a wash, or I don't know. So,
Well, both the civil criminal and the jail and the marijuana tax money is coming into the general fund in non-departmental. So whether you're budgeting that revenue in the non-departmental and supplementing all of the departments, including the sheriff's department, and whatever their percentage of taking the general fund contributions, or if you put it just directly into the civil criminal, it's all still general fund money. So it doesn't change your bottom line general fund by moving it from one department within the general fund to another. But it might look different if you did that in the budget, showing it as a revenue there rather than over here.
And I understand why we would do that. I just think for sake of transparency, for me it's easier to see what's actually going into a budget and what's being used. So if we show the marijuana money actually going into the sheriff's office, and we can see that he's spending it, I mean, to me that's clearer than saying we're just going to put it in a general fund and he's going to get some warm fuzzy number out there that we really can't track. I mean, I think it just looks better to say this money was given to us for certain use or purpose, and therefore it's going into the sheriff's department.
And how this came about was, we're part of CENT, and CENT is South Coast Interagency Narcotics Team. That's Coos and Curry counties. In order for us to be part of that and get some help with them, I felt we needed to put a little money towards that program, because they were having issues trying to keep it funded up in Coos County. And we've had several meetings with the other agencies. I actually just had one last couple weeks ago. I went to Julie and I said, I'd like to be able to pull 25 grand out of that state marijuana tax and give it to CENT in order for us to be still partisan and get the resources we need from them when we have a drug case, or they'll help us out with asset forfeitures and things like that. 25 grand is really nothing in the whole
scheme of things. But when you get several agencies that are trying to do the same thing to keep Scent viable, that's huge, you know, for our drug.
What's the total budget for that scent
I'm
program?
not sure. I know it's being ran by the Coos County Sheriff's Office, and several of the other agencies are given manpower along with cash as well to keep that in its own funding. I don't know what the whole funding is.
The actual scent budget itself pays for the director, which currently has been, he actually just got promoted and he's going back to Coos Bay PD as a captain, paid for his position, and then the one office person, and then it paid, and then there's a fund set aside for doing buys, you know, some buy money and that kind of stuff. It was roughly about, and also paid some very minimal rent on a building, specifically for Scent, and then travel and training, and it's roughly, if I remember correctly, I saw the budget, it's about $285,000 a year, and then that's there's some monies built in there that are for just in case the big case comes up. But like I said, it paid one salary, and then the second salary, a little rent, and then some buy money. It's not a large budget, and then all the rest of the people that participate in Scent are paid by their respective organization. So if we sent a detective up to Scent, we would actually pay all their benefits, their salaries, all that, and they would be a member of Scent. So that's how it's pretty much.
So are there other counties involved other than Coos and Curry?
Just Coos and Curry.
Coos, Curry, and then the local police departments also.
So are they paying into it, the local police departments?
Yes, some of them do, and then a lot of it historically has been funded, and I know you guys, this has all been thrown around, quite a bit of it has been funded by seizures. But if you don't have a team doing a lot of work, you don't have a lot of seizures. So, and that's, even though that is a way to get revenue, it's not guaranteed, as you brought up. I mean, it's when you get a seizure, you get a seizure, and you know, honestly, one of the things that we used to seize all the time were vehicles. Now, most of the time when you get a big load of dope, it's usually an Avis or a Hertz, or they rent cars because they don't want to lose theirs when they're hauling dope. So, so that's, you know, that stuff happens. So
you can't seize the rental, huh?
We're not the only counties that do this. You take Douglas County, for instance. They have their own, it's called DINT, Douglas County Narcotics Interagency Team. So with it, huh? Yeah, they get federal.
So bottom line, this program's pretty much paying for itself by the drug seizures and that sort of thing, or?
Well, and with the other agencies putting in manpower as well, and paying for those resources.
And my point on that was, let's take some of our marijuana money to put towards that so we can continue that membership, because right now the marijuana money is just going to everyone.
Earmark. Yep.
In the general fund. It's in the general fund.
Like the TLT is going to, part of that's earmarked for the Sheriff's Department if it passes. The same thing with the pot money.
And we didn't budget for TLT money, did we?
No, we did not.
It's on the IFCOM.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about the search and rescue budget. That would be page 104, tab 17. So historically, the search and rescue that was in Fund 128 was really getting a lot of donations. They're either general or specific purpose donations, and search and rescue operations, let's call it operations, was in the general fund. So a couple of years ago we moved the general fund SAR into this 128 fund, so we have one search and rescue fund. The problem is we started budgeting by saying that most of our money would be coming in from Title III. And Title III is active searches, search and rescue, a lot of money over there. And it'll probably take us 200 years to spend all the money that's sitting over there because you could only use it on active search and rescues. You can't train for it, you can't buy equipment in anticipation of it, you can't do a lot of things with it, only use it during, you can buy equipment if you need that equipment immediately during a active search and rescue. And also, we can only provide money to this fund in the percentage of search and rescues that are on federal forest land. So we get a report of how many searches there were for the year, which ones they were, and which ones were forest land. And that percentage, say it's 35% was on forest land, we could only provide to this fund 35% of the spending we could reimburse from Title III. But the other 65% has to come from another revenue source because Title III is the only revenue source that this search and rescue really has. So what we're budgeting this year is we're kind of being very conservative by budgeting a transfer of 3/4 from the general fund and 1/4 from Title III. We know this year, where were we at, Sheriff? We were at like 40-something%.
Yeah, we just had another search on federal land, so it's pretty close to 50% now.
So right now, we're kind of running almost a 50-50 in this current year, that we could use 50% of all the expenditures and cover them by Title III. But we don't know that until everything's said and done. And we close our books, and then we get the Title III transfer over. So in anticipation, I think we're being very conservative by asking for $75,000 as a transfer out of the general fund and funding the other 25% from Title III. And if it comes to the part where we get down to the end of next fiscal year and we have 55% on federal land, then we will just take less from the general fund and what we need from Title III. But I have to, in order to make sure that I don't have a shortage, because I don't know this number until books are closed. It's too late to do a supplemental budget. So I'd rather err on the budgeting 75% out of the general fund rather than trying to find how I'm going to make this fund whole by when I close the books. I need to be able to take as much as I need to from the general fund. I don't think it's going to be 75, but I'm budgeting that way.
Commissioner Gold.
So is there a big pile of Title III money sitting out there that you just have to wait until something special happens? Did they give it to us years and years ago, or did they give it to us on an ongoing basis? Or?
So this was the handout earlier today, Title III funds. There's $42,000 left from what we were receiving prior to 2008.
Okay.
It's not being used. That is the most flexible of the Title III money because there are restrictions on how you can use Title III money, but those dollars are a lot more flexible than any of the other funds we've had since then.
Okay.
The ones after that, we have $219,000 of that money. Those are assigned to different projects. Some of the money has been released, but basically you can only use the released money and the interest on those monies. You can only use them on those projects that were written up at that time. So if I wrote up Marine Patrol, if there's released funds, I can use it for Marine Patrol, but I can't use it for something else that didn't have a project written for. So it's a little bit more restricted before than 2008, but it's not, I mean, I still have some working space in that. Anything that was received after 2011 is search and rescue on federal lands, active searches only money.
Okay, anytime you write a grant, though, it's very specific and
Well,
have
this
to be
was
very
a
careful.
written grant. This was this is legislature providing funds for the SRS, the Secure Rural Schools, when they stopped logging on the federal lands. This is a supplemental money that they were giving us to us. That's why everything stopped.
And if you want to scratch your head, dig into the Title III fund.
Yes, why don't you read all those federal regulations? I don't understand any of it.
Well, I'm still scratching, but that's okay, just as long as you're
But
taking
yes,
care of-
and so when this is down below what I'm saying, that I'm budgeting this year to use 30,387. That's what I budgeted to take from the Title III funds for Marine Patrol. It's using some of those released funds because Marine Patrol was one of our projects. It's now out of money, and it has been since the year before last. I mean, last year we used released funds. This year we're going to release funds. And if we're, this current budget that we're in, we didn't even budget to try to get money out of Title III for Marine Patrol because we knew there wasn't any left. And so that's where we are.
I just got to say, this is a lot more complicated than the school budgets.
It is.
Just went through that, and this is like, okay.
Any other questions for the sheriff? Thank you, Sheriff Ward. We'll see you tomorrow at 10:45. Is that our plan?
I think, yeah, 10:45 is on the schedule.
Any other business we need to discuss today? Well, call for adjournment. So moved.
Yeah.
Second.
Technically be in recess until tomorrow.
I didn't ask that question.
I didn't ask that many questions.